At 6:03 on a snowy December morning, my son called and said, "Dad, it's better if you stay home this Christmas. The Vail trip is just for our little family." I stared at the hotel reservation ski passes and gifts I had spent nearly $70,000 on. An hour later, I made my way to his house, wanting the truth face to face. But I saw my son, my daughter-in-law, and her family leaving in 2 luxury SUVs for the vacation I paid for. When they vanished into the snow, I noticed an upstairs window open. I climbed inside, and what I found hidden there sent a chill down my spine. My phone buzzed at 6 o'clock in the morning, and for a split second my body thought I'd overslept for work. Old habits die harder than the people who built them. I'd been awake since 4. Walter Beckford, 72 years old, silver-haired, with the steady hands of a man who gave 3 decades to aerospace engineering at the chief level, standing in the dim half-light of my Arvada kitchen at 3140 Briar Hollow Lane, the one warm corner left in a house that had grown far too big for a single person. The coffee came together on pure muscle memory, the 30-year kind that bypasses conscious thought entirely. Pour water, measure grounds. Welcome back to Grandpa's Revenge. I'm glad you're here with me today. If this is your first time, tap the subscribe button so the next story comes straight to you. Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Have you ever looked back on a situation and realized someone you loved had been quietly working against you the whole time? Drop a yes or no in the comments. I read every one. One more thing before we get into it. Some details in this story have been shaped for the telling, and any resemblance to specific real people is purely coincidental. What matters is the truth at the heart of it. Press start. Wait. Dorinda Beckford's photograph held its place by the window. Morning light landing on a smile the camera had locked in 2 years earlier. Cancer silenced her. My wife of 31 years. She'd have spotted this betrayal long before it ever reached me. That empty chair across the table, hers every morning until pancreatic cancer ended our breakfast for good. The kitchen still held traces of her coffee, though the smell had cured into something habitual rather than something that warmed you. 3 wrapped gifts sat on the counter. A Lego Technic roller coaster set, an aviation history book covering the Apollo lunar module program, a crimson wool hat that Dorinda had custom ordered 8 months before she passed. She'd known she wouldn't make it to Christmas, but she wasn't going to let that stop our granddaughter from receiving something beautiful. All 3 for Lily Beckford, 9 years old, a kid who devoured aviation history and anything with moving parts. The only one across 3 generations who still listened to me like my words were worth something. $67,000, that's the number the Vail trip carried. Chartered transportation, slopeside luxury lodging, 5-star dinner reservations, one-on-one ski instruction for Lily. Not about having money. About knowing grief hollows you out like a pressure vessel with no relief valve, and that the only release is building real memories alongside the people still standing beside you. At 6:02 a.m., I refilled my cup and stood at the window. December snow drifting down, picturing the expression on Lily's face the first time she looked out and saw peaks instead of the flat Colorado plains surrounding Arvada. Then the phone moved. Declan Beckford's name on the screen. My 34-year-old son, a man who had quietly mastered the art of inflicting damage through a device rather than standing a foot away and owning it. I put the coffee down and opened the message. Plans changed. Melinda thinks this trip should just be for our core little family to heal our marriage. More comfortable for you to stay home where it's warm. We'll send pictures. 3 reads. Not because I didn't understand it, because that's how I was trained 35 years in aerospace engineering, and when a structure cracks, you don't react, you analyze. The source of the failure was right there in the wording. Melinda thinks told me this hadn't come from Declan's mind. Core little family was her construction, not my son's vocabulary. More comfortable for you was concerned theater, the kind that demeans the person it's supposedly protecting. I spent 35 years learning that the words in any document identify its real author before anything else does. The phone lay flat on the table. I looked at it the same way I used to look at readings from a failed pressure test, aware the rupture had already occurred, just methodically gauging the scope. $67,000. 72 hours of logistics. Gifts sitting in paper and ribbon. Confirmations filed by date in a printed folder. And a single text at 6:03 a.m. on December 22nd, 2023, informing me I had no place in my own family's plans. Screenshot. Old reflex capture the failure mode before it disappears. Forwarded to my personal email subject line December 22nd. Declan, exclusion message. Engineers don't cross their fingers and hope the record holds. They create the record themselves. I got up, went to the closet, and found Dorinda's gray knitted sweater, the one she'd completed 2 months before her diagnosis. The faint trace of lavender hand lotion was still woven into it. I pulled it on and felt the familiar weight across my shoulders, the way her hand would rest there when we did dishes together at the sink. I need a cab, I told the dispatch app. Corner of South Gilpin and Washington Park Drive. Yes, now. The operator offered to push the booking later given the road conditions. Now, I said again. If you've ever heard the person you raised tell you that you're not family, you understand what that kind of silence does to a room. It doesn't echo. It just presses down on you, cold and dense as iron. I didn't crumble. I didn't ring Declan demanding he explain himself. I didn't stand in front of Dorinda's photo waiting for an answer. What I did was calculate. 34 years raising this son. $67,000 directed towards something I hoped would mend what had frayed. One daughter-in-law whose phrasing had effectively replaced my son's own voice in his messages. One text timed at dawn late enough that I'd already be awake early enough that I couldn't realistically get to Washington Park to say anything face-to-face. Someone had run the numbers on me. Had decided I'd sit in my kitchen, maybe place one phone call, maybe write something sad, but that ultimately I'd absorb the cut, the same way I'd absorbed losing Dorinda quietly because I couldn't stand the thought of losing Declan too. The cab materialized 14 minutes out, its headlights pushing through the pre-dawn snowfall. I put my coat on and walked out the door, leaving the gifts untouched on the counter, not even turning the lock behind me. Nothing inside that house needed protecting anymore. I gave the driver the Washington Park address and watched streetlights smear by through glass fogged with cold. The phone vibrated twice. Could have been Declan, could have been Melinda, could have been Lily wondering where I was. I left it alone. Engineers gather information, first respond second. Before I ran any calculation, I needed to lay eyes on what core little family actually amounted to. The cab swung onto South Gilpin Street, snow compressing under the tires, and through the curtain of white I found them 2 black Escalades sitting at the curb in front of Declan's house, exhaust climbing in slow columns against the frozen air. Core little family. I saw immediately it wasn't what the phrase implied. I stepped out onto South Gilpin Street at 7:15. 2 black Escalades, white exhaust blooming upward into the December sky like signals marking a send-off I was never supposed to see. 7 people. Not intimate, not small. 7 people moving bags into luxury SUVs as snow settled across Washington Park's groomed front yards. Roland Vreeland, 58, ran the whole operation like a man who'd directed far larger productions. He owned Vreeland Property Group Denver and held himself the way people do when they've spent decades believing every situation bends toward whoever asserts control first. He pointed, gestured at trunk space, issued instructions to no one in particular. Audra Vreeland, 55, stood in fur eyes on her phone and a list only she could see. She glanced up as I climbed from the cab. Her expression didn't register me the way you don't register a planter you've already placed in your mental map of the space. Garrett Vreeland, 33, was horizontal in the back seat, headphones sealing him off, feet up on the headrest in front of him. His whole adult life had been built on the assumption that someone else's money was simply available to him, no accounting required. Melinda Beckford, 30, in a ski jacket priced above most people's rent, moved through the loading process with the calculated efficiency of a high-end Denver real estate broker who closes on her own schedule and no one else's. Tags checked, bags sorted, eyes pointed everywhere except toward me. And Declan Beckford, my 34-year-old son, polo shirt already creased at 7 in the morning, eyes jumping the way a teenager's do when the backdoor plan is discovered. He was standing near the lead Escalade Lily's purple suitcase in his grip. He saw me. His body tightened, actually flinched. Then something shuddered behind his face, and it went smooth and unreadable. I crossed the street. Snow gave under each step. Audra had her window down before I'd cleared the driveway. "Oh, Walter," she said, the smile already arranged. "Elderly joints don't do well in mountain cold. If you slip and fall up there, the kids will have to spend the whole trip nursing you. It's truly best you watch the house." I looked at Declan. He looked at the pavement. 7 people, 2 luxury SUVs, $67,000 of my money carrying a holiday I was apparently too breakable to attend. When exactly did being excluded become an act of care? I said nothing to Audra. Instead, I moved to the rear of the nearest Escalade where Roland was muscling the final bag into the cargo hold, and that's when I saw the tags. Every single one the Vreeland family printed out attached official. Vreeland, not Beckford, not a split name, not a compromise. My name didn't appear anywhere on a trip I had financed, organized, and believed in. Roland pressed the trunk shut with a firm, final thunk. "Safe travels," I said, keeping my voice level. He turned and looked at me for the first time. "We'll send pictures," he said in the tone of someone making a concession. The two Escalades rolled away at 7:32 a.m. I held my ground in the street and watched their taillights thin and vanish into the snowfall. 90 seconds. That's how long it took for fresh powder to close over the tire tracks and erase every trace of their departure as though none of it had happened at all. The reasonable choice would have been to call another cab. Go back to my kitchen, back to the counter where those gifts sat wrapped and purposeless, the ones I'd never now hand to Lily. Let this join the grief already lodged in my chest, the weight Dorinda left behind. Heavy, fixed, not going anywhere. But an engineer who doesn't understand why something failed hasn't finished his job. I circled Declan's house on foot instead. 6 inches of snow already on the ground, moving along the north wall, trying windows, looking for a way in. Evidence. Explanation. The laundry room window sat cracked, not wide, maybe 2 inches, just enough to frame white paint and let cold air seep through. I stopped, looked. The latch wasn't catching. I could tell from where I stood. The plastic housing had tightened in the Denver cold until the mechanism couldn't seat. I'd flagged this exact flaw 3 years ago during a winter visit and told Declan to swap out the latch before the plastic got brittle enough to shatter. He never did. Here's the line. An old man nursing a wound goes back inside where it's warm. A systems engineer traces the failing component. I heard Dorinda's voice so clearly I turned to look. Nobody there. Just snow and white-capped pines in a quiet street, but the voice came anyway. "Walter, don't climb through that window unless you're ready to see what you've been refusing to look at." 10 seconds. Maybe 20. Snow landed on my shoulders and soaked into Dorinda's gray sweater, and I thought about every moment I'd chosen to look past things that didn't add up. Melinda's taste for the expensive on a broker's income, Declan's slippery non-answers when finances came up. The way Roland always seemed to be in the room whenever decisions about my son's affairs were made, decisions I was never consulted on. I pushed the window up. It slid too smoothly because the frame had warped and the seal had long since failed. I grabbed the sill, hauled myself up, and came through into the laundry room. Inside, freezing air, dead quiet. Nothing but the refrigerator cycling somewhere deeper in the house, and the faint trace of Melinda's expensive perfume hanging in the cold like a warning I should have registered years ago. I came to a stop in the empty kitchen and read the room the way an engineer reads a cockpit after an accident report. Marble countertops without a mark. Stainless steel surfaces without a smudge. Everything arranged to look right, controlled, in order, but something inside this house was fundamentally off. I couldn't yet name it, but in 35 years of aerospace work, I had never once failed to find a root cause when I committed to the search, and I now had 7 hours of uninterrupted time to run a full diagnostic. The first piece of evidence wasn't buried. It was waiting in Declan's office down the hall, in plain sight on his desk, left there by someone too confident in their own position to imagine anyone looking. I moved straight from the kitchen toward Declan's office. No drawer pulling, no forced entry. An engineer reads a space like a schematic. The critical component almost always sits closest to the person using it, and the red UPS envelope lying directly on the desk, completely uncovered, told me everything I needed to know about the level of arrogance in this house. The office was a mess. Papers stacked beside a half-finished cup of cold coffee. Ski brochures, printed emails, a credit card statement turned face down. But the red packet dominated the surface placed on top as if its owner couldn't conceive of anyone ever lifting it. The label read, "Petition for Conservatorship, Denver County District Court." Below that, printed in bold, respondent Walter Beckford. I stood there 3 seconds, maybe 5. Then I opened it. The petition asked Denver County Court to appoint Melinda Beckford as sole conservator of my estate. The stated grounds: early onset cognitive decline and paranoid ideation requiring immediate intervention to prevent irreversible financial harm. I turned the page. Page 2 detailed my supposed symptoms: memory lapses, inability to manage basic finances, sudden irrational expenditures. The Vail trip was cited specifically as evidence of impulsive spending inconsistent with my historical financial patterns. Page 3 was a medical certification. Crestline Wellness Center, Thornton, Colorado, dated December 18, 2023. Signed by a Dr. Clifton Ferentz, licensed clinical psychologist, certifying that I showed moderate cognitive impairment consistent with early dementia following a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation. I have never set foot inside the Crestline Wellness Center. I have never met Dr. Clifton Ferentz. I have never undergone a neuropsychological evaluation in my life. I turned to the final page. A signature sat above the line for Walter Beckford. I studied it. Over 35 years, I've put my name on thousands of engineering validations, inspection records, quality certifications. I know my own signature the way I know my hands, the angle of the entry stroke, the particular loop in the middle letters, the slight upward drift at the end. The stroke weight here was wrong, the curvature was wrong, the pressure pattern was wrong. This was a forgery. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a methodical, coordinated legal operation built to strip away every right and every asset I'd spent 60 years accumulating. I brought out my phone, switched to camera, and photographed every page in sequence, front and back, systematic, thorough. The petition, the stated grounds, the fabricated medical certification, the forged signature. 12 pages total. Then I returned the file to exactly the position I'd found it. Same angle, same placement, same coffee ring, partially covering the lower corner. My hands weren't steady, not from cold, but from the weight of what I'd just uncovered. I left the office and took a seat on the living room sofa. The leather was cold. The house was silent except for the refrigerator's hum and the quiet, steady tick of a wall clock I'd given Declan when he bought this place. I focused on my breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way Dorinda had coached me after I'd come home too many evenings with my teeth clenched over a failed pressure test. My left hand grazed the pocket of the gray sweater. Something stiff was in there. I'd never put this sweater on before today. Every time I'd lifted it these past 2 years, I'd set it back down. Wearing it meant feeling the absence of Dorinda's hands on the needles, and I hadn't been ready for that. She'd finished it 2 months before the diagnosis, before cancer announced itself, before everything we knew became before. I reached into the left pocket and drew out a small sheet of paper folded into quarters. The ink had faded slightly at the creases. The handwriting was Dorinda's, precise, deliberate, identical to the script she'd used to label every folder in our filing system across 31 years of marriage. I opened it. Walter, if you are reading this, it means you finally need it. I watched Melinda look at you like a bank account from the day of the wedding. You didn't see it because you refused to look. Do not let your love for Declan blind you to the truth of the woman next to him. I love you. H. I sat without moving for 5 minutes. If you've ever held a note from someone who recognized the truth you were too devoted to face, you know that grief and gratitude don't take turns. They arrive in the same breath. She knew. Dorinda had known from the wedding day 7 years ago, when Declan married Melinda in that overpriced Washington Park venue with the ice sculpture and the 7-tier cake, and a guest list that ran about 90% Vreeland relatives. I'd written the check and smiled through the whole reception and told myself Declan had found someone with drive and ambition. Dorinda had seen something else entirely, and she'd tried to tell me. Even when her body had run out of strength for spoken words, she'd folded this note into the pocket of a sweater she was still knitting, somehow certain there would come a day I'd reach for it. I refolded the paper along its original creases, careful and precise the way you handle documentation that can't be replaced. Then I tucked it into my breast pocket, the one over my heart. She'd identified the design flaw. Now it fell to me to correct it. I stood and let my eyes move across the living room. The gas fireplace that had never once been lit, the leather furniture that looked costly but held no warmth, the abstract pieces on the walls that Melinda had selected and Declan had paid for without asking what they cost. This wasn't a home. It was a set built for a production, and I had been cast as the senile old man who couldn't be trusted with his own affairs, who needed protecting from his own decisions, who would hand over control to his daughter-in-law for his own good. What Dorinda had left me in that pocket wasn't money. It was clarity, total, unambiguous, and this house still held the rest of what they'd tried to conceal. Because if they'd gone so far as to forge a conservatorship petition, there was a reason they needed legal control this badly. That reason was somewhere in these rooms. I turned back toward the kitchen, my mind already plotting the search, systematic, structured, every drawer, every file, every sheet of paper they'd left behind in their confidence that no one would ever come looking. The next piece wasn't concealed in a drawer at all. It was fixed to the refrigerator door tucked between utility bills and a takeout flyer. as if it had never crossed their minds that I might be standing in this kitchen to read it. I went back to the office, this time working the bottom drawer of Declan's desk. An engineer knows that secondary liability documentation gets filed below the primary asset, buried where most people give up looking. The drawer pulled open with a soft scrape along the metal tracks. Inside, manila folders arranged with the kind of precision that pointed straight to Melinda's real estate background. Color-coded tabs, alphabetical sequence property tax, 2023 insurance declarations, home maintenance records, and one folder marked simply listing agreement. I lifted it out and laid it open on the desk. Exclusive real estate listing agreement. Vreeland Property Group, Denver letterhead, dated December 15, 2023. 1 week ago. Between Vreeland Property Group Denver and Westside Property Solutions, a name I'd never encountered. I scanned toward the property description. Property address 3140 Briar Hollow Lane, Arvada, Colorado. My home. The house Dorinda and I had purchased 35 years ago when Declan was still learning to walk. The house where I'd sanded floors and painted walls and replaced the furnace twice over. The house I'd fully paid off 8 years ago so we could retire without carrying any mortgage. Status line pending vacant delivery, January 8, 2024. Listing price, $740,000. The breath went out of me. I knew this market. 3 months back, when the property tax notice came in, I'd pulled the county assessment, $890,000. And since county appraisals typically run about 10% below true market, the actual figure was closer to $980,000. $740,000 sat nearly $150,000 below what the house was worth. This wasn't a real estate transaction. It was a fire sale of an asset that wasn't theirs to sell. Distressed pricing means one thing: they needed liquidity fast. January 8th, 17 days away. The math ran itself in my head. Christmas fell on December 25th. New Year's Day on January 1st. Title companies run skeleton crews through that stretch. Family attorneys take holiday leave. County recorder offices operate at half capacity. 17 days enough for what exactly? Enough for me to sit quietly at home while paperwork moved through the system during the holiday blackout. Enough for the people processing this transaction to work without anyone asking inconvenient questions. The timeline wasn't coincidental. They needed me at home alone, cut off from the trip while they pushed through the sale during the one window when questions were least likely to surface and intervention would be hardest to mount. I brought out my phone and photographed every page, every line item, every corporate seal, every signature block, the Vreeland Property Group Denver logo, the Westside Property Solutions contact information. The January 8th delivery date circled in red ink. Then I returned the document to the folder, slid the folder back into the drawer, and closed it exactly as I'd found it. No sign that anyone had been here. I stood at Declan's desk, palms flat on the surface, and worked through what I now knew. Forged conservatorship petition claiming I lacked mental capacity, fraudulent medical certification from a facility I'd never walked into, a covert sale of my property at fire sale pricing, vacant delivery in 17 days, a family exclusion I'd bankrolled timed precisely to keep me pinned at home during the holiday transaction window. An aerospace engineer learns fast that discovering one critical rupture in a pressure system doesn't mean you start patching. First, you map the full damage before touching a single valve. This was no longer a disagreement over a ski trip. It was a coordinated asset liquidation engineered to drain everything I owned while stripping me of any legal standing to resist. One gap remained. Why did they specifically need me at home on December 24th? The conservatorship filing was in, but no judge had approved it yet. The property sale wouldn't close until January 8th. Something else required my physical presence at the Arvada house on Christmas Eve. I moved back toward the kitchen. The answer wasn't buried in any drawer. It was stuck to the refrigerator door, pressed between utility bills and a takeout flyer. A printed confirmation email from Colonial Home Appraisal Services addressed to Declan Beckford. Subject appointment confirmation. December 24th, 2023. I pulled it free and read it fully. This email confirms your appointment for residential property appraisal at 3140 Briar Hollow Lane, Arvada, CO on December 24th, 2023 at 2 p.m. Please ensure property owner or authorized representative is present to provide access to all interior spaces. Appraisal will be completed within 90 minutes. Report will be delivered within 48 hours for mortgage underwriting purposes. Mortgage underwriting purposes. They were either refinancing my house or pulling a loan against it. On December 24th, while I sat home alone, cut off from Vail, waiting on digital photographs that could never come close to compensating for what I'd felt standing in that driveway. The appraiser would need someone inside to open the doors. That someone was meant to be me, the old man with the fragile joints who couldn't handle mountain cold, but could certainly stand in a living room, unlocking doors for property appraisers on Christmas Eve. I stood in Declan's kitchen holding the confirmation email and saw the full architecture of the trap take shape. Step 1. Push me off the trip using my health as a cover story. Step 2. Keep me physically present at the Arvada house during the appraisal window. Step 3. Use the appraisal to secure financing or support the fire sale listing price. Step 4. Execute the conservatorship petition, cutting off my legal capacity to challenge any of it. Step 5. Close the sale on January 8th, absorb the proceeds, and hand me a situation I'd have no legal footing to reverse. I photographed the email front and back, every word, every timestamp. Then I pressed it back against the refrigerator door, exactly where I'd found it wedged between the gas bill and the takeout flyer. My hands had gone still. The shock had completed its conversion into something colder and far more precise. Dorinda had warned me. She'd read Melinda's character from the wedding day, and I'd written that off as a mother's instinct, the natural wariness of a woman reluctant to share her son. But Dorinda had spent 30 years as an accountant before she retired. She could read a balance sheet. She could find a discrepancy. She understood how predatory behavior dresses itself in the language of partnership. And she'd tried to tell me. The December 24th appraisal appointment made the whole logic plain why the man with the elderly joints couldn't manage mountain skiing but was perfectly capable of standing in an Arvada living room answering questions about square footage and furnace age. There had to be more. If they'd forged one document, arranged one transaction, excluded me from one trip to execute one appraisal, the structure ran deeper than this. I needed to keep looking. The appraisal appointment had locked in the timeline. They needed me home alone on Christmas Eve so the inspector could move through my property without triggering any concern. But the structure was larger than that. I walked from the kitchen toward the back hallway, moving past Declan's cluttered office for the third time, and finally noticed what I'd gone by twice without registering. Lily's bedroom door stood slightly ajar. A faint blue glow reflected off the hardwood floor. I stopped. The light was steady, not flickering the way a nightlight does, more like a screen left on. I stepped up to the threshold, not planning to enter, just to look. The teal iPad Air sat on Lily's bed, still active, throwing pale light across stuffed animals and aviation posters. I'd bought that tablet for her 9th birthday the previous year. The iCloud account ran through my primary email address because a 9-year-old doesn't carry a standalone account yet. I picked up the device to lock the screen. That's when I saw the video folder. One file was still open in the preview window titled Grandpa with a smiling emoji dated December 19th, 3 days ago. Lily regularly recorded short clips to send through our shared family app. Little messages, jokes, updates on school projects. I'd collected dozens over the years, each one something I kept and returned to when I needed reminding why any of this was worth fighting for. I pressed play. The video opened on Lily's face, filling the frame, her red winter jacket vivid against Declan's dining room background. She was smiling that gap-toothed smile she'd carried since losing her front tooth in October. "Hi, Grandpa," she said to the camera. "I'm practicing my song for the Christmas concert." Then she began to sing, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Her voice was clear and completely unself-conscious, the way children's voices are before they learn to be careful. She panned the tablet around the dining room, the table, the chairs, the window, with December snow falling past it, but the microphone stayed live and it picked up ambient sound drifting from the kitchen behind her. Melinda's voice came through sharp and clean. "He won't understand the legal filings before we get back from Vail." Then Declan's voice quieter, less certain. "But my dad is going to Melinda again, cutting straight through. Your father is 72 years old and hasn't reviewed a legal document since he retired. By the time he figures out what happened, the conservatorship will be filed and the house will be in contract." Then Lily started singing louder, her voice swelling over the rest of the conversation. "Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh." "Hey." The video ended. I stood in my granddaughter's bedroom with the tablet in my hand, letting the silence settle around me. A 9-year-old child singing Christmas carols, completely unaware that her microphone was picking up her parents in the next room mapping out how to rob her grandfather. If you've ever held proof that your own child engineered your ruin, and that proof arrived in the voice of the grandchild you would give anything to protect, you know that heartbreak has chambers grief cannot reach. I played the video again. Once, twice, 3 times. Listening to Melinda's voice, that certainty, that clinical precision, by the time he figures out what happened. And then Declan's hesitation. But my dad is going to... What was he about to say? Object, push back, fight. It didn't matter. Melinda had cut him off, and whatever resistance Declan might have had died in that kitchen 3 days ago while his daughters sang about one-horse open sleighs in the next room. I went into the share menu and pushed the file directly to my private cloud storage, not the family iCloud. My own encrypted backup accessible to no one else. The upload took 4 seconds. Confirmation on screen video saved to secure storage. I looked around at the stuffed animals on Lily's bed, the stuffed brown bear I'd given her when she was 3, the space exploration book we'd read together last summer about the International Space Station, the crayon drawing she'd made of the two of us looking at stars pinned to her bulletin board with a caption, "Me and Grandpa." Lily, I'm sorry I have to use this, but I promise I'll protect you in a way you'll understand when you're older. I locked the screen and set the tablet back on the mattress in the exact position I'd found it. Same angle, same placement, no trace of my visit. Outside snow kept falling across Denver. The house held its silence, broken only by the refrigerator cycling and the soft tick of the wall clock. I checked my watch. 9:38. They'd been gone more than 2 hours. The Escalades were probably somewhere on I-70 by now, climbing toward the mountains, Lily watching snow drift past the window, while her parents congratulated themselves on leaving the old man home where it was safe and warm. I made my way back through the hallway to the kitchen. My phone was sitting on the counter where I'd left it after photographing the conservatorship petition. I picked it up and scrolled through my contacts. There was one person left in my circle of trust. One person who would hear what I'd found and not tell me to forgive, to seek therapy, to consider mediation, or to give Declan the benefit of the doubt. My younger sister Celeste had been sounding the alarm about Melinda for 7 years since the engagement party, when she'd pulled me aside and said, "That woman looks at you like a retirement account, not a father-in-law." I'd brushed it off as sibling loyalty, the instinct of a woman who didn't want to share her brother's attention. But Celeste had spent 30 years as a high school principal before she retired. She knew how to read people. She could spot manipulation before it had time to settle. She understood how predatory behavior disguises itself as ambition, exactly the way Dorinda had understood it. I needed to get outside and make the call. But there was one more thing to check before I left. One more item in this house I hadn't touched yet. Declan's laptop. It was sitting on his desk in the office, closed, not locked away. And I knew the way you know things you can't fully explain yet, that if I could get inside it, I'd find the financial skeleton behind everything I'd uncovered. The bridge loans, the shell entities, the wire transfers, the complete ledger of how they intended to strip my life down to zero. I just needed the password. Declan's office smelled like leather and something sour underneath it. I stood in front of his broad desk, staring at the laptop he'd left behind in his rush to make the Christmas departure. The black Dell laptop met me with a password prompt, the cursor blinking like a pulse I no longer trusted. I tried the obvious combinations first. Declan's birthday, Melinda's birthday, their anniversary date, nothing. 3 failed attempts meant I had 2 remaining before the system locked entirely. My fingers stayed over the keys. What would my son reach for every single morning? What number had lodged itself deep enough to type without thinking? Then it landed like a blow I should have braced for. I typed 03142022. The screen opened instantly. March 14th, 2021. The date Dorinda died. He'd turned his mother's death into his daily password. Every morning, every login he keyed in, the day she left this world. Was it guilt? Grief? Something darker. A trophy. A reminder of the inheritance he'd helped Melinda pursue. I had to grip the desk edge to keep my balance. The room tilted for a moment, and I made myself breathe through it. Focus, Walter. You're here for evidence, not for feelings. The desktop came up arranged with the meticulous order of someone certain his secrets were safe. I opened the email application already signed in naturally. Declan had never imagined anyone reaching this machine. I started at the most recent messages and worked back. Shipping confirmations for ski gear, calendar invites for client calls, chain emails about Vreeland Property Group Denver listings. Nothing that stopped me. Then a sender name caught my eye, Ridgecrest Bridge Capital. Subject line, RE Emergency Bridge Loan. Beckford Collateral, approved. My mouth went dry. I opened it. Dear Mr. Vreeland, per your urgent request of December 15th, 2023, Ridgecrest Bridge Capital has approved your emergency bridge loan application in the amount of $1,800,000. Terms 18% APR, 90-day maturity secured by collateral as specified in your power of attorney documentation. First payment, $600,000 released December 20th, 2023 to account ending 4738. Second payment, $600,000 scheduled December 24th, 2023. Final payment, $600,000 scheduled December 27th, 2023. Please acknowledge receipt and confirm collateral account access. I scrolled to Declan's reply. Confirmed. POA grants full access. Fidelity account 84729-HRG contains $1.4 million liquid, more than sufficient coverage. Proceed with schedule. He'd used the power of attorney forged. It had to be forged to pledge my Fidelity account as collateral against nearly $2 million. Money I had no knowledge of for purposes I couldn't yet fully see secured against assets I'd spent 40 years building. My hands were shaking badly enough that I pulled them off the keyboard. How long before my body simply refused, I looked up at the wall behind Declan's desk. Dorinda looked back from a silver-framed portrait, the one taken on our 30th anniversary, her eyes full of the life she still had 3 years left to live. Had Declan looked at her face every day while he built this? While he used her death date to unlock his schemes each morning? I pushed my attention back to the screen. Keep going. There's more. 3 emails down the thread. Sender, Roland Vreeland. roll.vreelandvreelandproperty.com. Declan, the Pinnacle lawsuit is accelerating. They're demanding $2.3 million by January 1st, 2024, or they file criminal fraud charges. We need liquid assets now. What's the status on zeroing out the old man's accounts? Declan's response sent at 11:47 p.m. on December 18th. In progress, bridge loan approved using his Fidelity as collateral without his knowledge. Once conservatorship is granted. Hearing January 6th, we'll have full legal access to liquidate everything. First payment hits Friday. By the time he figures it out, the accounts will be drained and the court will rule him incompetent to challenge it. The lawyer we hired, Petwick, says Walter's refusal to attend the psych evaluation works in our favor, makes him look unstable. We'll have $1.4 million from Fidelity, $3.5 million from Dorinda's life insurance when we trigger the payout, plus the house sale closes in January. More than enough to cover Pinnacle and fund the Vale expansion. Roland's reply, perfect. Make sure the old man doesn't touch his accounts before Christmas. If he sees the withdrawals, we're exposed. I lowered myself into Declan's chair because my legs had stopped being reliable. They'd designed every piece of it. The conservatorship petition to have me declared incompetent. The bridge loan to empty my accounts before I could move. The life insurance scheme to collect on Dorinda's death. Even the house sale, my home, the one Dorinda and I had built our life inside, was already earmarked to settle their debts. I wasn't a father to any of them anymore. I was a balance sheet. A solution to Roland's legal exposure and Declan's cash shortfall. I opened the email attachment, a PDF of the wire transfer receipt. Ridgecrest Bridge Capital wire transfer receipt. Date December 20th, 2023. Amount $600,000. Recipient Declan P. Vreeland, account 4738. Source collateral Fidelity account 84729-HRG, $1,400,000 verified. The next wire was dated December 24th, 2023. $600,000. 48 hours away. If I let Christmas Eve arrive without doing something, another $600,000 would evaporate, and I'd be 2/3 of the road to being completely wiped out. That 45-minute head start I'd been banking on had shrunk to nothing. Felt more like 45 seconds. Phone out, I shot everything on the screen, the email chain, the wire receipt, the collateral documents. Every frame was ammunition I'd need the minute Norbert Caswell unlocked his door Monday morning. Except Monday was a problem. That second transfer would fire automatically in 48 hours whether anyone intervened or not. I shut the laptop. The login screen blinked back at me, March 14th, 2021, like a headstone. Declan had miscalculated in exactly one way. He'd been certain a dead man had no moves left. What he'd failed to account for was that Dorinda married an engineer. Engineers spend their careers understanding one thing above all else. Every system, however well built, carries within it the flaw that will bring it down. I walked out of Declan's office and took the stairs up to the second floor. The master bedroom was open just as Melinda had left it the morning before. Her perfume still lived in the air, something cold and costly. The walk-in closet ran 15 feet back. I threaded past rows of shoes to the rear wall where an oak wardrobe stood against the plaster, hiding what I'd come to find. I moved it aside. Behind it, a matte black wall safe with an electronic keypad. I punched in 20847, the house number. The mechanism released. The door came open. The house number, 4 digits. That was all the security my daughter-in-law thought she needed for what she'd stashed in here. She hadn't kept this safe at a state attorney's office because she needed to get into it herself, and often she reviewed these documents on her own schedule. What greeted me was a blue leather binder, gold lettering across the front. Amarisha's life insurance. I lifted it free. Underneath it, a state of paperwork, Melinda's passport stock certificates. But those weren't why I'd come. I took the binder to the window, where pale winter light pressed through the slats. Policy AL-8847293-2023. Insured party Walter Wesley Beckford. Coverage amount $3,500,000. $3.5 million. Riding on whether I lived or died. I turned to the history page. Prior coverage $1,200,000, written in 2018. Escalation date November 18, 2023. Revised coverage $3,500,000. November 18th. 3 weeks to the day after the business sale finalized. The instant they had the assets in hand, they jacked up the payout on my death. I found the beneficiary page. Primary beneficiary, Melinda Rose Cole Vreeland. Relationship daughter. Effective date of change, November 7th, 2023. Prior beneficiary, Declan Paul Vreeland. November 7th, 1 day after the sale proceeds landed in my account. Melinda had gone into an insurance office and quietly swapped the names, erasing Declan's and writing in her own. What kind of wife does that slices her own husband out of a multi-million-dollar policy without a word? Page 7 told me why. Special provisions. Accidental death and dismemberment. A D&D double indemnity. Should death occur by accidental means, the benefit rises to 200% of face value. Accidental death payout $7 million. $7 million provided I didn't die in a bed. This was never about stealing my money. They were engineering my death. I lowered myself onto the window bench, the open binder resting across my legs. November 7th, the day they'd written my expiration date into a legal document and filed it with an insurer. 5 weeks on from that, I'd been at Thanksgiving across from Melinda, spooning mashed potatoes onto her plate, asking her about Lily's school play. She'd smiled warmly and wondered aloud whether I was staying current on my heart medication, while she was already running the numbers on whether an accidental death would double the take. I made myself breathe. I photographed every page: coverage amount, escalation date, beneficiary switch, double indemnity provision. Because what I was holding wasn't proof of financial crime anymore. It was evidence of something that had no other word for it. I tucked the binder back inside the safe, locked it, and slid the oak wardrobe flush against the wall. The front door wasn't an option. The security camera out front would log the timestamp, and Declan watched that feed. I went down to the laundry room where a casement window faced the side yard. I worked it open and pushed through into 8 inches of overnight snow. The air hit me like cold iron. I eased the window shut at my back, then moved around to the neighbor's driveway, staying under the oak tree where it broke the sightlines from the street cameras. I dialed for a cab. When the dispatcher came on, I gave the address, 1800 Glenarm Place. Snow's bad. How long? 20 minutes, sir. Your driver's about 4 blocks out. I stood beneath the oak and waited. The yellow sedan appeared without fanfare, and the driver kept his eyes on the road and his questions to himself. I settled into the back seat and had my phone out before we'd reached Colorado Boulevard. Denver was gridlocked. The storm had reduced every lane to a crawl, brake lights bleeding red as far ahead as I could see. I found Norbert Caswell's direct number and called it. He picked up on the second ring. Walter, I didn't expect you to be calling on a Sunday. 30 years. That's how long Norbert had been my estate attorney, a composed, deliberate man in his late 60s, silver-haired, with the settled steadiness of someone who'd sat across the table from every stripe of family treachery imaginable. He had managed Dorinda's estate when she passed. There wasn't an asset I owned or a name on my inheritance list that Norbert didn't already know. I have to see you right now, I said. I'm maybe 10 minutes out. Tell me what's happened. Melinda and Declan filed a conservatorship petition. They want me declared incompetent. The medical certificate they submitted is a forgery. They've listed my house for sale with a January 8th handover date. They pulled a $1.8 million bridge loan under a fraudulent power of attorney and pledged my Fidelity account as security. I heard Norbert's chair shift under him. There's more, I said. They bumped my life insurance to $3.5 million 6 weeks back and moved the beneficiary over to Melinda. This isn't fraud anymore, Norbert. This is a murder plan, and December is the deadline. Silence 4 full seconds of it. Then, get here now. Don't stop at home. Don't reach out to Declan. Stay away from any accounts they might have eyes on. What's my window? The January 8th handover date puts 16 days between us and the hard wall. But the moment they realize, you know that math changes completely. The cab lurched through a pothole. I nearly dropped the phone. The screen flared Declan calling. I pushed decline and watched it roll to voicemail. First time in my life I'd sent my son's call to voicemail without a second thought. I'm almost there, I said to Norbert. I've got photos of everything. Good, keep them exactly as they are. Bring the phone in. The line went dead. We swung onto Glen Arm Place, the wipers working hard against the snow. The downtown towers were charcoal shapes against a white sky. My phone buzzed. Declan, Dad, where are you? Melinda's worried. Call me. A moment later, we should talk about Christmas plans. Then starting to get concerned, please respond. I switched it to silent. Worried. They were worried because whatever they thought they'd been managing had walked itself out the door, and they'd lost the signal. Through the glass, I picked out 1800 Glenarm Place, Norbert's building, 23 floors of steel and windows. The driver angled to the curb. This is you, sir. Cash in hand, I stepped out into the storm. The phone trembled in my coat. Declan's 5th text in under 20 minutes. I didn't look at it. I walked toward the revolving doors, knowing full well what crossing that threshold meant. The moment I sat down with Norbert and put a legal filing in motion, they'd know I was awake to all of it. 16 days would compress into something I couldn't predict. But the other road, waiting out December 24th, letting that second transfer clear gambling on whether the accidental death clause was theoretical or already in motion, that wasn't a road at all. I went through the doors, crossed the lobby, and hit the elevator button for the 18th floor. It opened at 11. I walked into Norbert's law office, and the receptionist pointed me straight toward the conference room without a word exchanged. He'd called ahead. When I came through the door, Celeste was already there, seated at the glass table. My sister had arrived before me. That told me she'd been carrying knowledge of this for long enough to beat me across town. Her coffee had gone cold. She hadn't touched it. When she looked up at me, I recognized the expression, something I hadn't seen in her face for years. The hard, protective anger of a woman who'd devoted 4 decades to teaching teenagers how to spot someone coming for them. Declan phoned me yesterday, she said, not waiting for me to settle. Wanted to know if I'd picked up on any signs, memory slipping, getting confused, making poor choices. I told him you had more clarity than men half your age. He didn't care. He already had the story he needed. I took the chair across from her. What did you say to Norbert? That if my nephew is constructing a medical case against you, every brick of it is a lie. Norbert came through the door with a leather portfolio under his arm and clicked it shut behind him. He acknowledged Celeste with a nod and fixed his attention on me. Show me everything, he said. I opened Signal on my phone. The encrypted images came up one at a time, the iPad screenshots of the $67,000 travel itinerary and the conservatorship filing, the shots from the laptop showing the Ridgecrest Bridge Capital correspondence, $1.8 million borrowed against my Fidelity account with no authorization from me, and the insurance policy frames, $3.5 million Melinda named as beneficiary, double indemnity clause spelled out in black and white. Norbert moved through them without making a sound. 3 minutes went by. Celeste leaned in her grip, tightening on the table's edge when the insurance escalation date came up on the screen. At last, Norbert put the phone down. Colorado Revised Statute Section 1514-403 requires 14 days written notice and a formal hearing before any conservatorship can be established, he said. They filed ex parte on the strength of a fraudulent medical certificate. This petition is fatally defective and ripe for immediate dismissal. The forged signature and fabricated medical documentation give us grounds for an emergency motion to strike. Latin doesn't stop the December 24th wire transfer, I said. No, Norbert agreed, but freezing the accounts does. He got up and crossed to the whiteboard on the conference room wall. Blue marker number 1, point 1 freeze, Fidelity before the 24th. Point 2, revoke every power of attorney Declan currently holds, medical, financial, all proxies. Point 3, an independent cognitive assessment from a neurologist to tear apart their incapacity narrative. Celeste watched him write. He kept going, points 4 through 7, his handwriting steady and exact. Insurance fraud complaint to state regulators. Forensic audit demand on Ridgecrest Bridge Capital. Formal eviction notice, the unfunded trust gave me that standing. And an Adult Protective Services emergency flag. We convert their conspiracy into a crime scene, he said. I looked at the board, 7 numbered items. Freeze, revoke, evaluate, report, audit, evict, protect. A surgeon's checklist for taking apart a family one legal motion at a time. What's the timeline? I asked. Norbert capped the marker. Accounts frozen today. Motions drafted tonight, filed first thing tomorrow. But the moment Fidelity gets the freeze order, Declan will know you've made a move. He already knows I've gone dark, I said. He sent 10 texts in the past 3 hours. Then we don't wait. Norbert made a call. 10 minutes later, we were in his car heading south Celeste in the back seat, snow still drifting down over downtown Denver. The Fidelity branch at 950 17th Street occupied the ground floor of a glass and steel tower. We came through the door at 3 o'clock. Norbert asked for the branch manager by name. Gwendolyn Rourke came out of a back office 2 minutes later, a woman in her mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, carrying the brisk alertness of someone who'd dealt with financial crimes before. Norbert handed her his card. She studied it, studied me, and led us into her private office. What's going on? She asked once the door was shut. Norbert laid it out in 4 sentences. Fraudulent power of attorney, forged conservatorship petition, $1.8 million, bridge loan drawn against my client's assets without authorization. Life insurance escalation that points to something beyond financial abuse. Gwendolyn picked up her desk phone and dialed from memory. This is Gwendolyn Rourke, branch manager, 17th Street, Denver. I need corporate legal. Elder abuse case emergency hold request. She was on that call for 32 minutes. Norbert and I sat without speaking, watching snow build up on the street outside. At one point, Gwendolyn said into the phone, fraudulent POA forged conservatorship petition, $1.8 million bridge loan, using client assets as unauthorized collateral, requesting emergency hold under the Colorado Financial Elder Abuse Prevention Act. When she hung up, she looked straight at me. I'm initiating an emergency hold under the Colorado Financial Elder Abuse Prevention Act. It will be fully processed by tomorrow morning. Nothing moves, no withdrawals, no transfers, no liquidations until then, and nothing at all afterward without a court order and your physical presence with 2 forms of ID. Something let go inside my chest, a weight I hadn't registered carrying since I'd cracked open Declan's laptop 6 hours before. The December 24th payment, I asked. Flagged for manual review, it won't process automatically, Gwendolyn said. Once the hold clears tomorrow morning, it's fully blocked. She turned to her monitor, typed, and scrolled through the system logs. Her finger stopped. December 19th, 2:47 p.m. liquidation attempt denied. What is that? Norbert asked. She swiveled the screen so we could both see. System shows a liquidation attempt Thursday, December 19th, 2:47 p.m. Same timestamp as the bridge loan wire you described. POA authorization failed. Secondary verification failed. Attempt denied. Norbert came forward in his chair. They already tried to drain it and the system turned them away. So the December 24th transfer was always going to fail, Gwendolyn said. But now they're aware that you know. She paused. And your son has been calling you for 3 hours. She printed a certified receipt confirming the account freeze and the opening of a fraud investigation. I folded it and slid it into my jacket pocket. We walked out at 4:15 p.m. The sky had closed down to dark streetlights bouncing off fresh snow. Norbert walked Celeste to her car while I stood on the sidewalk running through my missed calls, 10 from Declan, 3 from Melinda. I kept turning over Gwendolyn's parting words. They know we know. By this point, Declan had called the Fidelity fraud line, found the freeze, understood that his own father had gone from a passive target to someone actively fighting back. The accounts were locked. The scheme was documented. The legal counteroffensive was set to file in the morning. But 16 days had just compressed into something I couldn't map. I put my phone on silent and headed to Norbert's car, where Celeste was waiting to drive me to her place in Cheeseman Park. Tomorrow the motions would be filed. Tonight I had to work out whether staying out of sight was still the right call, or whether 10 unanswered calls meant Declan was already triggering whatever the double indemnity clause had been written to fund. Norbert was already dialing Emeritus insurance compliance before the engine had fully turned over. Hold music filled the parking garage through the speaker as I buckled in and braced to hear exactly when Melinda had concluded my life was worth more to her ended than continued. The hold music cut off. Emeritus Special Investigative Unit, this is Nadine. Nadine, this is Norbert Caswell, attorney at law, calling on behalf of my client Walter Beckford, policyholder. We need to discuss an unauthorized beneficiary modification executed November 7th. He read out the policy number from his notes. Keyboard clicks. What's the issue? The beneficiary change was made without my client's knowledge or authorization. We're pursuing elder financial abuse charges and require transaction metadata. Beneficiary modification, November 7th, 4:18 p.m. Mountain Time, submitted through the policyholder's online portal using a social security number ending in 4421 and the registered email address. 4:18 p.m., Norbert said, 2 days after the business sale closed. Those credentials were used without authorization. I need IP address metadata and device fingerprint logs for a fraud investigation. That requires special investigative unit escalation. You'll need a formal Adult Protective Services demand or law enforcement subpoena. You'll have the APS documentation within the hour. Norbert ended the call and eased out of the garage. The snow had stopped, but the streets were glazed, brake lights burning red ahead of us. November 7th at 4:18, I said, 2 days after the sale closed. When did the proceeds reach your account? November 5th, $3.8 million. 48 hours from windfall to death benefit optimization, Norbert said. That's not opportunistic crime. That's operational planning. I opened my calendar. November 5th, the money arrived. November 7th, she logged into the insurance portal using my social security number. November 28th, she sat across from me at Thanksgiving dinner and asked whether I'd gotten around to updating my will. I stopped. The phone screen glowed in the darkening car. November 7th to November 28th, 21 days. 3 weeks between Melinda placing a bet on my death and asking me to pass the gravy boat at my own table. She had already monetized my funeral when she asked me to carve the turkey, I said. Norbert said nothing. He just drove. We pulled into the underground garage at 1800 Glenarm Place. Upstairs, Norbert uploaded a signed APS preliminary complaint while I texted Celeste the address. She arrived 20 minutes later with a CVS bag, toothbrush, razor, clean shirt. She had assumed I wouldn't be going back home that night. She was right. At 6 o'clock, Norbert ordered sandwiches. We ate while he spread property files across the conference table, closing documents from 2020, when Declan and Melinda had moved into 1614 Willowgate Drive, Washington Park. Deed records, trust, documents, transfer tax filings. Celeste watched him work. You're going through property files at 7 on a Sunday night, she said. Because Declan attempted to sell Walter's house with a January 8th handover date, Norbert said. And I want to know how he planned to transfer a title he doesn't hold. He worked through the pages, cross-referencing dates against document numbers. I finished my second sandwich and watched snow slide past the downtown windows. Denver quiet on a Sunday night. Here, Norbert said suddenly. He laid 3 documents side by side, the 2020 Trust Creation Agreement, the Washington Park deed from 2018, and a blank space where something was conspicuously absent. Your 2020 estate plan created the trust, he said. But look, no recorded assignment deed, no transfer tax filing, no trustee acceptance. The trust is a legal ghost. You still own that house outright. I leaned forward. What I was about to uncover in the next few minutes would rewrite everything I thought I knew about the people living under my roof. Before we get there, if someone you trusted had been quietly maneuvering against you, would you confront them the moment you found out, or would you go silent and build your case first? Think on that. Declan had been living there 3 years under the assumption it was his. Colorado Revised Statute Section 134104 says you can serve any unauthorized occupant with a 10-day notice to quit. Norbert's finger landed on the page where the assignment deed should have appeared. Exception assignment deed to be recorded following execution. But that deed was never executed, never recorded, never filed. They had verified the bank accounts, the investments, the insurance policy, but nobody had ever run a title check on the house they slept in. Celeste set down her sandwich. You're saying the trust doesn't actually hold the property? Under CRS Section 1516-207, an unfunded revocable trust gives the grantor absolute declarant power, Norbert said. Walter created the trust structure, but Declan never completed the transfer. The house is still Walter's. Declan is a tenant without a lease. 3 years. Declan had spent 3 years in that house, hosted Christmas dinners, put roses in Dorinda's backyard, repainted Melinda's childhood bedroom, all while taking it as a given that he owned the place, all while never once checking whether the legal transfer had gone through. He'd been so occupied forging powers of attorney and filing fraudulent conservatorship petitions that he'd overlooked the one asset he'd assumed was already safely his. How quickly can you get an eviction notice drafted? I asked. Norbert glanced at his watch. 30 minutes. Do it. He opened his laptop and began typing. Celeste and I stacked up the sandwich wrappers while the keys clicked away. Through the windows downtown, Denver glowed in the December night buildings trimmed for Christmas streets nearly empty. At 7:45, Norbert printed 2 copies of a 10-day notice to vacate and slid one across the table to me. Sign here, he said. Your actual signature, not whatever version Declan's been counterfeiting on POAs and loan documents. I picked up the pen. The notice was addressed to Declan Paul Vreeland and Melinda Rose Cole Vreeland. Occupants 1614 Willowgate Drive, Washington Park, Denver CO80210. It cited Colorado's unlawful detainer statute and gave them 10 days to clear out. Celeste watched me sign. They plan to evict me from my own life, I said. I'm giving them 10 days to pack. I signed my name, Walter Wesley Beckford, the same hand I'd put on my business incorporation papers 40 years ago on Dorinda's marriage license on Declan's birth certificate. The signature Declan had been forging for months without ever taking the time to get it right. Norbert took the notice, sealed it in a certified mail envelope, and wrote Monday's date across the flap. Service first thing tomorrow morning, he said. By noon, they'll know they have until the following Wednesday to get out. Celeste studied me from across the conference table. When they get that notice, what do you think they'll do? I looked at the sealed envelope. Declan and Melinda would have it in their hands by tomorrow. 72 hours to leave a house they believed they'd already inherited. The accounts were frozen, the insurance fraud was flagged, the conservatorship petition was void. But Celeste's questions sat between us like smoke. What would they do when they realized they'd lost everything? I had no answer for that, not in Norbert's conference room with the eviction notice sealed and the legal machinery ready to move, so I told her I needed to go home. Stay at my place tonight, she said in the parking garage. You shouldn't be by yourself. I need to be alone, I said. I need to think like an engineer, not a father. She didn't push back. She just pulled me into a hug and headed toward Cheeseman Park, and I drove west through empty white streets back to Arvada. The house was dark when I unlocked the front door at 10:08 p.m. Exactly what I needed. No sister asking questions. No attorney laying out contingencies. Just silence and the engineering discipline that had sustained a 40-year career and would now be turned toward dismantling a family. I switched on the kitchen light. Mail was piled on the counter, forwarded from Washington Park. I didn't open any of it. I filled the coffee maker, pressed start, and sat down at the table. The drawer to my left held pens, rubber bands, old birthday cards. I reached in for a pen and felt the folded paper underneath. Dorinda's handwriting, blue ink on lined notepaper. My hands were unsteady as I opened it. March 9th, 2021, 5 days before she died. I read it aloud to the empty kitchen. Trust your engineering, not your heart. The math never lies. When you face something impossible, break it into nodes and solve each one sequentially. I love you. F. She'd written that from hospice morphine, already making her hands shake. Every word had cost her something. I'd found it in her nightstand after the funeral and put it away because reading it felt like going under. Now I set it face up beside my coffee mug. She had known. Somehow she had known that Declan would force me to choose between being a father and being a survivor. That I'd need permission to stop feeling and start calculating. Trust your engineering, not your heart. I pulled my journal from my jacket and turned to a blank page. 42 years. I'd designed pressure systems, flow rates, failure points, cascade dependencies. This was just another schematic, another problem with a solution. I wrote Node 1 in the top left corner and drew a box around it. Monday, December 23rd, 9 a.m., independent medical evaluation. A neurologist appointment Norbert would confirm in the morning, an objective cognitive assessment to demolish Declan's incapacity narrative. Node 2 below and to the right. Tuesday, December 24th, revoke all powers of attorney. Medical, financial, every proxy Declan had forged or legitimately held. Requires Node 1 completion as evidence of capacity. Node 3. Wednesday, December 25th, insurance fraud complaint to state regulators supported by the medical evaluation proving competence. Christmas Day filing. Poetic and tactical. The coffee maker beeped. I ignored it and kept writing. Node 4. Wednesday, January 1st, execute eviction 10 days from Monday service. Sheriff-assisted removal if necessary. Node 5. Friday, December 27th, Ridgecrest Bridge, Capitol Forensic Audit. Demand fraudulent POA documentation unauthorized collateral pledge. Node 6. Saturday, December 28th, Adult Protective Services, Emergency Protective Order account freeze asset monitoring investigation launch. Node 7. Sunday, December 29th, Emergency Guardianship Block filing a preemptive motion to prevent Declan from submitting an amended conservatorship while the APS investigation was still active. I drew arrows between each node, dependencies cascading like valves opening in sequence. Node 2 required Node 1 to be complete. Node 3 required Nodes 1 and 2. Nodes 5 through 7 all depended on upstream integrity. The flowchart looked exactly like the pressure relief schematics I'd drafted for 30 years, nodes connected by arrows, failure points circled in red. Except the system wasn't managing steam. It was managing the methodical destruction of my son-in-law's conspiracy. I added contingencies in the margins. If Node 1 delayed, shift nodes 2 through 3 right by 24 hours. If Node 4 was contested, run a parallel track through unlawful detainer proceedings. If Node 6 was denied, escalate through the district attorney's elder abuse unit. I checked the work 3 times, quality control review, each arrow traced every dependency, verified the critical path, calculated. 7 nodes, 7 days, December 23rd through December 29th. By December 30th, either I'd have my life back or I'd be watching from inside a facility while they liquidated everything Dorinda and I had spent a lifetime building. The kitchen clock read 1:30 a.m., 3 hours of work. I closed the journal, swallowed the cold coffee, and shut off the light. The house went dark. Snow released from the roof in soft slides, a sound I'd been listening to every winter for 53 years. The furnace came on. The refrigerator hummed. I stood in the dark kitchen, and for the first time since finding the iPad, I let the full weight of what I was about to do settle over me. I was about to deploy 40 years of engineering precision against the man Melinda had married. The man who'd called me dad for 22 years, the father of my only grandchild. Dorinda had died in the bedroom upstairs. We'd marked 41 anniversaries in this house. Declan had learned to ride a bike in that driveway, and now I was drawing up schematics to stop them from stripping the foundation out from under all of it. The snow sounded like breathing, like the house understood what was coming. I went upstairs and set my phone alarm for 6 a.m., 4 hours out. 4 hours before Norbert would call to confirm the medical evaluation, before Node 1 went live, before the schematic became operational. I lay down, fully dressed, the journal on the nightstand. The streetlight fell through the window and lit up the flowchart 7 numbered boxes that would either give me back my autonomy or prove that engineering discipline offered no protection against people who already knew exactly which pressure points to push. My phone showed 14 missed calls. Declan had stopped texting and moved to calling every 20 minutes. He knew the Fidelity accounts were frozen. He'd probably found out that Gwendolyn Rourke had launched an investigation. By 9 a.m. Monday, I'd have medical proof of my competence. By noon Monday, he'd have the eviction notice in hand. By Monday evening, he'd understand that the confused old man he'd been selling to judges and insurance companies had never existed. 4 hours of sleep, then the schematic went live. I closed my eyes and listened to the house breathe. Somewhere across Denver, Declan was asleep in a house he was about to find out he'd never owned. The alarm fired at 6 a.m. 4 hours, that's all I'd taken. By 8:30, I was showered, dressed, and seated in Norbert's car with Celeste in the back and my engineering journal across my lap. The 7-node flowchart was ready. Node 1 was launching. We pulled up to 200 West 14th Avenue at 8:55. Adult Protective Services occupied 3 floors of a gray municipal building, the kind that looks identical to every government facility you've ever walked into. Industrial carpet, fluorescent lights, a security desk just inside the entrance. A man in his mid-40s met us at the 3rd-floor reception area. "I'm Leon Hadfield, APS investigator." We shook hands, Mr. Beckford. He walked us back to a conference room digital recorder on the table, whiteboard on the wall. His eyes had the tired steadiness of someone who'd spent 20 years asking difficult questions, methodical in every movement, the kind of patience that gets built, one hard interview at a time. Norbert set his evidence binder on the table. "We're filing a complaint under the Colorado Adult Protective Services Act." Leon sat down and opened a case intake form. Colorado, APS Act Section 263.1101 defines financial exploitation as unauthorized use of resources through fraud, deception, or undue influence. Walk me through what happened. Norbert opened the binder. His son forged medical incapacity documentation, filed an ex-parte conservatorship without notice, and used a fraudulent power of attorney to execute a bridge loan. His son's wife changed the life insurance beneficiary to herself. Together they contracted to sell Mr. Beckford's home. The evidence is fully documented. Leon drew the binder toward him and read through it page by page, the forged medical certificate from Dr. Clifton Ferentz, the conservatorship petition, the Ridgecrest Bridge capital, emails showing the loan secured against my Fidelity account, the insurance policy with Melinda's beneficiary, change dated November 7th, the home sale contract with the January 8th delivery date. He wrote in a leather notebook, pen moving steadily across the page, asking clarifying questions, dates, amounts, relationships. "And the perpetrator is your son, Mr. Beckford?" "Yes, Declan, my son. His wife, Melinda, was behind most of it." Leon kept reading. 9:15 became 9:30. 9:30 crept toward 9:45. The room held no sound except turning pages and Celeste breathing beside me. At 9:47 a.m., Leon set down his pen and met my eyes directly. "Mr. Beckford, if this investigation leads to felony charges against your son and his wife, are you prepared to live with that?" The room went still. Under the table, Celeste's hand found mine. I'd known this question was coming. I'd rehearsed the answer at 2 a.m. with the flowchart spread in front of me, but hearing it spoken out loud in an official government interview room was something different from working through it alone in the dark. Leon waited. He was good at silence. "I want the investigation to follow the evidence," I said. "If that path leads to felony charges, then my son-in-law made choices that carry felony consequences." Leon nodded without writing anything down. "I need to hear you say it clearly. You understand this could result in criminal prosecution of your son and his wife." Celeste's grip tightened like she was anchoring me to the decision I was speaking into the official record, a case file number that would trail Declan and Melinda for the rest of their lives. "I understand," I said, "and I'm filing anyway." Leon lifted his pen and wrote something in the notebook. "All right," he said. "Based on what I'm looking at, I'm opening an active investigation." He turned to his computer and typed for 3 minutes, then swiveled the screen so we could read it. Case file APS-2023-Denver-4471. Subjects Declan Paul Vreeland, Melinda Rose Cole Vreeland. Complainant Walter Wesley Beckford. Investigator Leon Hadfield, badge 2847. Status active preliminary investigation. "This triggers a 10-business-day preliminary investigation," Leon said. "If the evidence supports criminal charges, I refer the matter to the Denver District Attorney. I can issue an emergency protective order within 48 hours if I determine there's imminent threat to your assets." Norbert leaned in. "This evidence supports it." "I agree. I'll have the protective order by Christmas Day. It will freeze all accounts, block asset transfers, and prohibit contact with financial institutions using your credentials." He printed a copy of the case file screen and pushed it across to me. "Keep this. Your case number is APS-2023-Denver-4471. I'll be in touch within 48 hours. We left the building at 10:30. Norbert drove while I sat up front holding the case file printout. Celeste was quiet in the back. "Ridgecrest Bridge Capital next," Norbert said. He swung into a parking lot and dialed on speaker. "Ridgecrest Bridge Capital Compliance Department. This is Norbert Caswell, attorney at law, calling regarding a bridge loan account for Declan Vreeland. I need your compliance officer." A brief hold, 90 seconds, then a woman's voice. "This is Petra in compliance. How can I help you?" "The power of attorney authorizing your bridge loan was forged," Norbert said. "CRS Section 15-14705 makes that a Class 5 felony. Section 18441 makes dispersing funds under fraudulent inducement a separate felony. Adult Protective Services opened a case file this morning." Silence. "I need to consult external counsel before responding," Petra said. Her tone had shifted in those 8 words from procedural to cold. "You have 24 hours, Norbert said. "After that, I file complaints with the Colorado Division of Financial Services and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau naming your compliance department as accessory to elder financial exploitation. Your team will freeze that loan within 12 hours. He ended the call. We were merging back into traffic when Norbert's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and pulled over again. "Your daughter-in-law just posted this." He angled the screen toward me. Instagram. Melinda's account. The photo showed Declan and Melinda at a bar, floor-to-ceiling windows behind them revealing a sweep of mountain peaks. 2 champagne flutes raised toward the camera, both of them grinning. Declan's arm draped around Melinda's shoulders. The caption, "Mountain Getaway Before the Holidays." Location tag, 4 Seasons Vale. Posted 10:15 a.m. 90 minutes ago, while I was sitting in Leon Hadfield's interview room opening a felony investigation 300 miles away. "They're drinking champagne in Vale," I said, "while I'm filing felony charges in Denver." Norbert zoomed into the image. "They think they've already won. In their minds, you're still the confused old man they've been pitching to judges. They're about to get served an eviction notice, find out their funding is frozen, and learn that APS has them moving down a felony timeline. Let them drink the champagne. It's the last toast they'll have for a very long time." Norbert drove us from the parking lot to South Broadway. The Instagram photo of Declan and Melinda raising glasses in Vale was still on his screen when we pulled up outside Jelly Cafe, South Broadway, Denver at 2:12 p.m. "The man who wired $50,000 for your house is inside," Norbert said. "He called my office this morning after Vreeland Property Group Denver told him closing was delayed." We went in past the post-brunch crowd. Brennan Kirby was already in the corner booth. A man in his mid-30s wearing the hollow expression of someone who just pieced together that his $50,000 deposit hadn't been buying a house. It had been financing someone else's theft. He stood as we approached. "Mr. Beckford, I'm Brennan Kirby." We shook hands. He was younger than I'd pictured, dressed in tech, casual, that said software engineer before he opened his mouth. Relocated from Austin to work at Palantir. His coffee sat in front of him, stone cold, untouched. "Mr. Kirby, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances," I said, settling into the booth across from him. "When I saw the listing for your Arvada house, the price seemed right for my family. Now I'm starting to understand why." He stopped himself. "I'm starting to understand why," he said again. Norbert placed his tablet on the table. "Mr. Kirby contacted our office this morning after Vreeland Property Group Denver notified him of a closing delay. He started asking questions." "How much did you put down?" I asked. Kirby's jaw went tight. $50,000. Wired December 18th to Vreeland Property Group Holdings. Roland Vreeland told me the seller was motivated to state liquidation. I asked twice for a certified title search. He said it would clear after the holidays and that closing was January 8th. December 18th. The same week Declan had executed the bridge loan fraud. The same week Roland had filed the fraudulent conservatorship petition. "I never authorized a sale," I said. "I didn't even know my house was listed until 4 days ago." Kirby looked down at his coffee. "I moved my wife and 2 kids from Austin for this position. We're in extended stay housing right now. That $50,000 was our entire down payment savings." He paused. "The price was under market." "How far under?" Norbert asked. $40,000 below comparable sales. I thought we'd gotten lucky. First house in Colorado, good neighborhood, priced for a young family. Too good to pass up." Norbert opened the evidence folder on his tablet. "Roland accepted your $50,000 deposit knowing he could not deliver clear title. The conservatorship petition claiming Walter is incapacitated is a forgery. The trust that was supposed to hold the property was never funded. Walter owns that house outright. Declan and Roland had no authority to list it." Norbert turned the screen toward Kirby page by page, the forged conservatorship petition, declaring me mentally incompetent, the fraudulent power of attorney Declan had deployed for the home sale contract, the unfunded trust documents establishing that I still held title. I watched Kirby's face as Norbert walked him through it. Watched the moment a software engineer in his 30s from Austin understood that his $50,000 hadn't vanished into ordinary real estate complications. It had been swallowed by a scheme that weaponized family law to strip a 72-year-old man of everything he owned. "So my 50 grand is just gone," Kirby said. "Funding their operating expenses," Norbert said, "unless you help us recover it." Kirby stared at the tablet, the evidence I'd photographed 4 days earlier inside Declan's office. The insurance policy with Melinda's beneficiary change, the bridge loan emails, the home sale contract with his name on the buyer line and Declan's forged signature on the seller line. "What do you need from me?" Kirby asked. Norbert leaned forward. "If you're willing to testify for the Denver District Attorney and hand over your documentation, you become the key witness. Not a family member, not an interested party, just a defrauded buyer with wire records and email proof." Kirby went quiet for 20 seconds. His finger traced the rim of his coffee cup. Outside the window, South Broadway traffic moved slowly through the December cold. Then he looked up at me. "I want my $50,000 back," he said, "and I want Roland prosecuted so he can't do this to another family trying to buy their first Colorado home." "You understand this becomes a criminal case," Norbert said. "You'd be testifying against Vreeland Property Group, Denver, Roland Vreeland, possibly Declan as well. DA referral depositions, potential trial." "I'll testify," Kirby said. "I'll hand over everything, wire transfers, emails, texts, the listing screenshots I saved, whatever it takes to stop this." He pulled out his phone and began forwarding files to Norbert's address. The original listing, Roland's replies about the title search, the delay notice he'd gotten that morning, and the wire transfer confirmation from December 18th, showing $50,000 sent to Vreeland Property Group Holdings, LLC. Evidence, third-party documentation, independent corroboration that pushed the case from a family dispute into pattern fraud with an outside victim. At 2:58, Kirby stood and reached across the table to shake my hand. "Mr. Beckford, I'll do whatever it takes to get us both justice," he said. He put on his coat, then paused at the edge of the booth and turned back. "My dad passed away last year," he said, his hand still half extended between us. "I'd give anything for one more conversation with him, but your son-in-law is working to take your life while you're still in it. I've never seen family turn on their own blood like this." "Neither had I said, "until 4 days ago." Kirby nodded, pulled his hand back, and headed for the exit. The door chimed as he pushed through it. I watched through the glass as he moved down South Broadway and dissolved into the December cold, the homebuyer who'd lost $50,000 and who had just become the independent witness capable of turning a family legal fight into a multi-defendant fraud prosecution. Norbert closed his tablet. That's your midpoint reversal. You're not defending yourself anymore. You're coordinating the trap. We drove back to Norbert's office after Brennan Kirby disappeared into the December cold. The midpoint reversal, that's what Norbert had called it. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was coordinating the trap. It was 4:06 p.m. when we walked back into 1800 Glenarm Place. A notification was blinking on Norbert's workstation, the kind of alert attorneys configure to flag court filings touching their clients. He clicked it open. Court notification, he said. Yep, family division, someone just filed. Celeste moved closer to the screen. Filed what? Norbert read in silence for 10 seconds. Dissolution of marriage petition uncontested filed by Melinda Cole Vreeland requesting divorce from Declan Paul Vreeland. I stared at the screen. Denver County District Court logo, case number, filing timestamp. Norbert scrolled down. Filed December 22nd, 7:23 a.m., electronic submission via mobile device. He kept reading. IP metadata shows United Airlines in-flight Wi-Fi. She filed for divorce from the airplane before it touched down in Vail. Celeste went very still. She knew before they even arrived. She knew she was leaving him. I looked at the timestamp again. 7:23 a.m. Declan's exclusion text had reached me at 6:40 a.m. Family exclusion, he'd called it. 43 minutes later, Melinda had executed a divorce petition at 35,000 feet. Then toasted with him at the Four Seasons bar 40 minutes after wheels touched down. Declan thinks this vacation is repairing their marriage, I said. She filed for divorce in the air and then raised a glass to him at the bar. Norbert pulled up the full petition. Pages of legal language. Celeste read over his shoulder her paralegal training from 30 years back, surfacing without effort. Look at the filing language, she said, pointing to Section 4. Community Property Division deferred pending resolution of financial investigations. She knows the APS case is incoming. She's establishing herself as the unwitting spouse before the felony charges arrive. Norbert nodded. She collects half the stolen assets files for divorce, claiming she had no knowledge, and walks free while Declan absorbs the conspiracy charges on his own. An extraction strategy. Completed before the gate at Denver International Airport, before the champagne photo, before Declan had any idea what was happening. I felt something I didn't expect looking at that timestamp. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Pity. Pity for my son sitting in Vail, believing a mountain holiday could rescue a marriage his wife had already legally ended before breakfast was served at cruising altitude. My daughter-in-law, I said quietly, is positioning my own son as the sole defendant. And he has no idea, Celeste said. We stood around Norbert's workstation for another 20 minutes going through the petition. Then Celeste drove me back to Arvada, and I spent Christmas Eve by myself. Christmas morning came in cold and silent. No tree, no decorations, no calls. I sat at the kitchen table with my engineering journal and executed Node 3 insurance fraud complaint to state regulators filed electronically at 9 a.m. Christmas Day, supported by the medical evaluation proving competence and the beneficiary change timeline proving premeditation. Poetic and tactical, exactly as I'd drawn it in the flowchart. Node 4 followed at noon. Ridgecrest Bridge Capital, forensic audit demand, formal letter citing the fraudulent POA and unauthorized collateral pledge. Dorinda had loved Christmas. 53 years of decorations, traditions, family dinners. This year it was cold sandwiches and insurance fraud paperwork. Declan hadn't called, hadn't texted. He was in Vail with a wife who'd divorced him 3 days ago and he still didn't know it. I worked through the afternoon, methodical, mechanical, each node executed the way I'd run pressure relief systems for 40 years. Check dependencies, verify sequence, document completion. At 7:12 p.m., my phone buzzed with an American Express push notification. I opened it. Supplementary card ending 4728. Declined insufficient authorization. Merchant Flame Vale, Colorado. Transaction amount $487.52. Flame. 5-star Vale restaurant. Christmas dinner. I had revoked Declan and Melinda's authorized user status. Monday morning absolute cardholder. Write no notice required. The change had worked through American Express within 24 hours. Their supplementary cards were dead metal. Card declined in the middle of Christmas dinner at a Vail fine dining restaurant. I didn't need to be in the room to see it. The server returning to the table. Black card face down on the check tray. The quiet apology. The silence. Declan reaching for his personal card. Melinda watching him work through his wallet. Merry Christmas, Declan. I set the phone on the table and looked at the empty chair across from me. Dorinda's chair. The one she'd occupied for 31 years of breakfast, 41 anniversary dinners, 53 Christmas mornings. I poured coffee cold from the pot I'd made at noon and raised the mug toward the empty seat. "Merry Christmas, Dorinda," I said to the silence. 54 Christmases we had together. This one I spent filing insurance fraud complaints and canceling Declan's credit card in Vail. You'd either tell me I'm doing the right thing or tell me I've turned into something you wouldn't recognize. I'm honestly not sure which. The house held its quiet. No music, no laughter, no Declan and Melinda coming through the door with Lily for dinner. No Celeste either. She'd offered to have me, and I'd said no because I needed to work. Just me and the engineering journal and Dorinda's empty chair. Outside, snow was falling on Arvada. The streetlights threw orange shapes across the kitchen wall. The refrigerator hummed its low note. 300 miles west in Vail, Declan sat at the flame with a declined credit card and a wife who'd filed for divorce from an airplane 3 days ago, both of them with no idea that I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was running their public humiliation from the tactical perimeter of my empty kitchen. The coffee was cold, the house was silent, and I could reach them anywhere. The phone vibrated at 9:02 p.m. while I was rinsing my mug at the kitchen sink. Declan's name on the screen. This would be the hardest note of the entire counteroffensive. I answered. "Dad." Declan's voice wasn't angry. It wasn't accusatory. It was shaking, confused. "The credit cards aren't working. The bank app keeps timing out. Melinda's been arguing with American Express for the past 40 minutes. Every rep she reaches tells her the accounts have been restricted. Do you know what's going on?" I shut my eyes. Dorinda's chair sat empty behind me in the dark room. "Declan, are you okay?" "I can't figure out what's going on," he said. Other voices leaked through the line. Melinda's taut, combative, aimed at someone nearby. "The waiter ran the card and it came back declined. Melinda's convinced it's identity theft. Dad, did somebody get into our accounts? Is that what happened?" There was no performance in his voice, no angle. He hadn't manufactured the confusion. He was living inside it, completely blind to the fact that I had set every one of these dominoes in motion. I could have ended his bewilderment right there. Told him Melinda had signed divorce papers somewhere over the Rockies before the wheels touched down. Laid out the APS case file. Told him Roland had run Brennan Kirby's $50,000 through as working capital. Told him I'd frozen the accounts, killed the cards, and dropped insurance fraud complaints on Christmas morning. But the moment Declan knew, Melinda would know. She'd use every hour of that return flight from Vail to shred files, scrub her inbox, and rehearse a unified story with Roland. Everything I'd built would come apart. The flowchart didn't permit disclosure. "Do you want to come home, Declan?" I asked. "From Vail. Just come home." Silence followed, heavy, unmoving. I could pick up his breathing through the receiver. Are you angry with me about something?" Something clenched in my throat. "I love you, Declan. I have always loved you." The silence stretched out further. "Dad, I don't." I ended the call. Stood there at the kitchen sink with the phone in my fist, a coffee mug sinking in soapy water, the darkness total around me. I'd handed him those words and then cut the line before he could dig deeper, before the weight of it cracked me open, because the engineering flowchart has no provision for mercy. If I'd said everything aloud, Melinda would have started dismantling the evidence trail before their plane ever reached Denver. I stood in that dark Arvada kitchen at 9:11 p.m., phone pressed against my palm, and I understood what I had just done. Telling Declan, "I love you, Declan. I have always loved you," may have been the truest and the most punishing sentence I'd spoken during the entire 7-day counteroffensive. True because I meant it without reservation. Punishing because I delivered it while burying everything else he deserved to hear. The flowchart doesn't allow for mercy, but it collects its toll. December 26th came in cold and colorless. I pulled up to 1800 Glenarm Place while the building was still quiet and found Norbert standing at his window, coffee in hand, with an expression I'd learned to read. "Roland and Declan have brought in emergency counsel," he told me, still facing the glass. "Aldous Petwick. Petwick and Associates, 1700 Glenarm Place, Denver. Should that name mean something to me?" Norbert's smile was the kind that telegraphs 3 moves ahead. He was managing partner at Goldman and Cross when I ran the place. I let him go personally in 2012 billing fraud. Padded hours, fabricated client time entries. His approach never varies. Emergency ex parte filings, artificial urgency, counting on the other side to fold before discovery even opens. Here's the thing: I was in that room 15 years ago when he mapped the whole strategy out. There isn't a step he'll take that I won't see coming. I turned toward the window and watched downtown Denver stir in the December cold. Aldous Petwick, Norbert's old partner, now sitting across the table. His first move will be a petition to freeze your assets. Norbert kept going. He'll argue you're liquidating everything to hide it. 3-day notice expedited hearing, a temporary restraining order filed before we can mount any response. That's always how he opens. Same playbook every time. So, what's our move? We submitted counter motions yesterday before he was even hired. By the time Petwick settles on a direction, we'll have already run the table on everything he planned to do to us. The first completed node had been the medical evaluation. I had it on the calendar for 3 p.m. at UC Health University of Colorado Hospital, Denver. Celeste navigated this midday traffic while I sat with my thoughts. The neurology department received us at 2:55. Dr. Lynette Paxford was waiting in the consultation room, a senior neurologist somewhere in her early 60s. Silver hair, drawn back, tight, radiating the quiet precision of a clinician who had run these assessments more times than she could count. No ties to either party, no money riding on the outcome. Precisely the profile Norbert had specified. Mr. Beckford, I'll be walking you through 3 separate assessments today, she said, laying manila folders across the desk. Montreal Cognitive Assessment, Mini Mental State Examination, and an Executive Function Battery. These represent the clinical benchmarks that Crestline Wellness Center was obligated to use and chose to ignore. She took me through it methodically. Memory recall, spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, clock drawing, word association, delayed recall. Every question got an answer, every diagram got drawn, every task got finished. At 4:15, Dr. Paxford set down her pen and lifted her eyes from the score sheet. 30 out of 30, she said. Perfect. Norbert came forward in his chair. Doctor, would you address the cognitive decline finding from Crestline Wellness Center? Dr. Paxford's face went flat. Crestline Wellness Center carries no licensed neurologist on staff. The evaluation they conducted breached Fundamental Medical Practice Act requirements. I'll put my name to an affidavit stating their findings are clinically unsupportable. 10 minutes at the keyboard, 1 printed page, 1 notary seal. 0 cognitive impairment, she said, passing the document across to Norbert. Perfect executive function. No evidence of dementia, disorientation, or diminished decision-making capacity. Whoever says differently is engaged in medical fraud. Before 4:30, Norbert had a disciplinary complaint queued to the Colorado Medical Board, naming Crestline Wellness Center, fraudulent capacity evaluation. No licensed neurologist on staff. Medical Practice Act Section 1236-17 violations. They'll lose their license, Norbert said. 5 o'clock. I stepped out of UC Health University of Colorado Hospital, Denver, and into snow that was coming down in slow, deliberate flakes. The capacity affidavit was in my hand. I ran through the flowchart in my head. What's still open? I said to Norbert. 2 nodes, he said. Eviction execution and emergency guardianship block. Close those out, and the 7 days are done. Every asset, every document, every legal corridor under our control. 2 nodes, 2 days. And the price of telling Declan I loved him on Christmas night, then disconnecting before he could ask why his cards had gone dead. December 27th, 6 in the morning. I pulled out my engineering journal and found the flowchart page. 7 boxes, total 5 bearing check marks. 2 still open node, 6 eviction execution and node, 7 emergency guardianship block. 5 days gone from the 7-day counteroffensive, 2 nodes standing between now and December 29th. I poured coffee and watched the first gray light push over Arvada. Nodes 1 through 5 complete. A PS case opened. Fidelity frozen. Ridgecrest Bridge Capital locked down. Brennan Kirby's testimony locked in. Capacity evaluation perfect. 2 nodes left. Either the flowchart sealed by December 29th and every variable belonged to me, or the mechanism gave out and Declan inherited everything. Physics, pressure, sequence. At 7:32 a.m., my phone lit up. Celeste. I'm in short-term parking at DIA. She didn't wait for me to say anything. They just walked through gate B17. I said I didn't want you at the airport, and I told you I had to see their expressions when they came back to find what you'd done while they were toasting each other in Vail. Car doors banging, shuttle buses grinding, all of it bleeding through the line. Roland's doing laps on his phone, visibly unraveling. Melinda is 10 feet in front of Declan, moving like he's a stranger. Your son-in-law has the look of someone who showed up to the wrong address. I let my eyes fall shut. Melinda, 10 feet ahead, living evidence of the divorce she'd filed from altitude 3 days ago, a fact Declan was still carrying around without knowing it. A marriage already over-broadcast in the gap between two people walking through an airport. Audra Rowland's wife was somewhere behind them yelling at their teenager about ski gear. Celeste kept narrating. This whole family is coming apart right in front of me. What else? The escalator now heading down toward baggage claim. Rowland hasn't hung up. Melinda has not once turned to look at Declan. He's got his bag, the ski equipment, hauling everything like a man who's been demoted to luggage carrier for a family that moved on without him. I listened to Celeste paint the picture of the Vreeland family riding that DIA escalator down, and something settled inside me, the quiet that comes over an engineer watching a badly built structure begin to surrender to its own internal stresses. You don't need to apply force. You only need to take away what was holding it upright, then let gravity and time do the rest. Get out of there, Celeste, I said. Head straight to Norbert's office. Stay out of their sight. She was already moving toward her car when the line went quiet. I stayed in the kitchen with the phone turning over the image, Melinda marching 10 feet ahead of Declan through Denver International Airport, the divorce she'd drawn up at 35,000 feet, the champagne photograph at the Four Seasons, Veil the Flame credit card rejection. Piece by piece, the mechanism was giving way. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd simply withdrawn the load-bearing elements. I reached 1800 Glenarm Place at 10 a.m. Celeste had beaten me there, sitting with her coffee eyes on Norbert as he moved through screens. Colorado Secretary of State Portal, Norbert said, not breaking his focus. Beckford Engineering, LLC, registered December 23, 9:47 a.m. Articles of organization filed. Registered agent, this office. Corporate purpose, commercial property acquisition and asset management. 100% ownership drawn from shop sale proceeds. I asked, your company outright, your capital ready to move? Celeste glanced back and forth between us. Move it where exactly? Norbert brought up a new document. Beckford Engineering LLC took an assignment of contract rights from Westside Property Solutions on December 24th. $50,000. Rights to what contract? Celeste asked. The purchase contract on Walter's Arvada home, Norbert said. Westside had held the buyer position straight from Vreeland Property Group, Denver. Beckford Engineering LLC was now the buyer of record. Celeste's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Wait, you purchased the contract on your own stolen house? I inserted my corporation directly into their paper chain, I said. Turned their asset liquidation into outright liability. It seems like it shouldn't work, Norbert added. But the moment your LLC becomes buyer of record, you're not just blocking the transaction, you've triggered a contractual breach that activates double damage penalties under Colorado Commercial Code. Rather than playing defense, you step forward as the plaintiff pursuing damages. Norbert rose from his chair and went to the whiteboard, sketching boxes and arrows the same way I'd laid out the flowchart. Vreeland Property Group, Denver, contracted to sell the property to Westside Property Solutions. Westside then assigned those contract rights to Beckford Engineering for $50,000, the identical figure Brennan Kirby lost. Beckford Engineering is now buyer of record, but Vreeland Property Group, Denver, is in material breach under Colorado commercial law because they agreed to sell a property they had zero title authority to touch. Civil exposure, Celeste asked. $2.2 million under the double damages non-performance clause. Norbert said, Rowland doesn't just forfeit the deal. He owes Walter $4 million. I watched Norbert map the mechanism across the whiteboard boxes linked by arrows, dependencies tumbling in sequence, pressure relief valves releasing one after another. They moved to sell my house in order to fund Rowland's pinnacle lawsuit settlement, I said. Now that very transaction has generated liability exceeding everything they intended to steal. Celeste laughed, a short, hard sound with no warmth in it. You turned their own fraud into a weapon. I only pulled out the load-bearing supports, I said. Physics handled everything after that. Norbert was still walking Celeste through the Colorado Commercial Code provisions when my phone buzzed at 11:58. Unlisted number, I answered. Melinda's voice came through like cold wire drawn tight. No greeting, nothing preamble. We need a settlement meeting today. My attorney's office, 2 p.m. You, your counsel, and whoever else you believe is going to help you understand how badly you've miscalculated. Hello, Melinda. 2 p.m. Petwick and Associates, 1700 Glenarm Place, Denver, 16th floor. If you fail to appear, emergency motions go in tomorrow morning and you forfeit everything you imagine you've secured. Don't make me say this again. The line went dead. I set the phone on the table. Norbert and Celeste were both watching. Melinda, I said. Settlement meeting 2 p.m. Aldous Petwick's office. She's saying if we don't show, they file emergency motions in the morning. Norbert looked at his watch. 2 hours. She wants an immediate response before we've had any chance to prepare. It's Petwick's playbook, I said. Manufacture urgency, push for settlement before discovery can open, except we've had 7 days to construct the counter-architecture, Norbert said, and she has no picture of what we've assembled. Celeste studied the whiteboard with its interlocking boxes and arrows. So we go to the settlement meeting. I thought about Melinda striding through DIIA 10 feet ahead of Declan. The divorce she'd executed from a commercial aircraft. The Beckford engineering contract assignment generating $2.2 million in exposure. The 7-day flowchart with 2 nodes still open. We go, I said, but not to negotiate. I did not attend the 2 p.m. settlement meeting at Aldous Petwick's office. Instead, at 1:04 p.m., I stood on my own front porch and watched the black Escalade arrive, watched Melinda step down onto my frost-covered lawn with a leather folder full of documents that no longer carried any force because I had spent 7 days dismantling everything those papers were meant to accomplish. Norbert stood at my left, Celeste at my right. The December air turned our breath to visible steam. The Escalade sat running at the curb. Melinda came out first with Roland and Audra Vreeland on either side of her. She had on a charcoal suit leather folder tucked under one arm like a professional credential. Roland looked tense, phone gripped in one hand. Audra kept glancing toward the neighboring houses as though the presence of witnesses was a variable she wanted to control. Melinda crossed toward the porch with studied composure and stopped at the base of the steps. Walter. "We can handle this like adults," she said, projecting authority across the frost-white lawn. "We have an emergency court appointment arranged around medical transition protocols. Your cooperation means this doesn't have to turn contentious." "You're standing on my lawn without an invitation," I said. "You chose not to appear at the very settlement meeting you demanded. Which one of us is the problem here?" "I came out personally to extend a dignified option," Melinda said. "Don't give me cause to take it back." I reached behind me and pushed the front door open. The room inside came into full view. Celeste had spent the morning placing the evidence across every flat surface file boxes organized by fraud category, a timeline mounted on poster board along the living room wall, tracing the conspiracy from beginning to end. Bank statements, insurance documents, court filings, 7 days of material arranged with the logic of an engineering failure analysis. Melinda's eyes caught on it. Roland's composure shifted. "You wanted to address medical transition protocols," I said. "Let me show you what I've actually been putting together." "What is all of this?" Melinda asked. Celeste stepped into the doorway behind me. 7 days of documentation. Adult Protective Services case file. APS-2023-Denver-4471. Want to see your section? It's the longest one. I moved to the edge of the porch and looked down at Melinda standing on the lawn below. $1.8 million bridge loan executed on a forged power of attorney, I said. $3.5 million life insurance policy beneficiary switched to yourself 48 hours after my business sale proceeds cleared. A fraudulent conservatorship petition alleging incapacity. My Arvada home put on the market without title authority. $50,000 taken from Brennan Kirby, a man who only wanted to buy a house for his family. Melinda pulled in a breath to speak. I didn't give her the opening. Fidelity accounts frozen under the Colorado Financial Elder Abuse Prevention Act. Ridgecrest Bridge Capital Loan suspended pending fraud review. Dr. Lynette Paxford's cognitive evaluation 30 out of 30, a clean sweep that dismantles the incapacity claim entirely. Colorado Medical Board complaint filed against Crestline Wellness Center for running evaluations without a licensed neurologist on staff. Roland's phone had gone silent in his hand. He was no longer pretending not to follow every word. "And the one that stays with me," I said. "Dissolution of marriage petition filed December 22nd at 7:23 a.m. via United Airlines in-flight Wi-Fi 43 minutes after Declan sent me the exclusion text. She divorced him from the airplane before the wheels touched down in Vail. Does he know that yet?" I held my attention on Melinda's face as I said it. Watched the precise moment her professional authority dissolved when she registered that I had seen everything recorded, everything, and was standing on my own porch reading the evidence inventory back to her like a structural failure report, while she stood on frost-bitten grass gripping a folder that no longer meant anything. "You don't understand what she started. "I understand it completely," I said. "You're standing on my property, holding documents that have been overtaken by events because every asset you tried to redirect is frozen. Every fraud in this file is documented, and Adult Protective Services is constructing a felony case with your name leading it." Silence. only the December wind and a low murmur of distant traffic. Roland came forward. You smug son of a Norbert stepped into the space in front of the porch steps. Every word being spoken here is being transcribed and will be hand-delivered to the Financial Crimes Unit before 5 p.m. today. Feel free to add threatening language if you'd like that reflected in your exposure. Audra seized Roland by the arm and dragged him back. Get in the car. Right now. Melinda held her eyes on mine for 10 full seconds without a word. Then she turned, walked back across the frozen lawn, and climbed into the Escalade. Roland and Audra followed without speaking. The SUV moved away from the curb. Norbert was on his phone before it cleared the block. Leon Hadfield. Norbert Caswell. I need you at my office in 90 minutes. Walter has definitive recording evidence you'll want to hear immediately. At 3 p.m. we arrived at 1800 Glenarm Place. Leon Hadfield was already in the conference room. Norbert connected my iPad to the media display and pressed play. Lily's voice came through first off key, entirely joyful. Jingle bells, jingle, all the way. My 9-year-old granddaughter. The iPad I'd given her for educational games registered to my account stored on the family cloud partition I co-owned. Then the surrounding sound changed. Adult voices surfaced from the background. Melinda. Signing the conservatorship papers at Denver County is the final asset lock. The old man won't be able to process the legal filings before we get back from Vail. Declan Rowland needs the cash wire cleared before January 1st, or Pinnacle takes the entire brokerage. We're cutting this close. Melinda. We're fine. He's disoriented, isolated, and by the time he works out what's happened, we'll have medical documentation in place declaring him incompetent to contest any of it. Lily's singing continued underneath. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Leon Hadfield stopped writing and sat listening. The recording ran for 4 minutes. Conspiracy discussion, asset timetables, Roland's Pinnacle deadline, the conservatorship strategy, all of it preserved, while my granddaughter sang Christmas carols with no understanding that her iPad was capturing her parents laying out a scheme to strip her grandfather's life from him. When it ended, Hadfield looked across the table at me. This recording was produced on my granddaughter's iPad, a device registered to my account, I said. Stored on a family cloud partition I co-own, Colorado privacy law compliant. This is direct audio evidence of conspiracy to commit grand larceny and elder exploitation. Hadfield said I'm hand-delivering this to DA Financial Crimes within the hour. One request, I said, my granddaughter's name Lily must be fully redacted from any public docket. She's 9 years old. She was singing a Christmas carol. She has no business having her name appear in court records connected to her parents' criminal prosecution. Hadfield nodded. Agreed. Victim minor redaction is standard protocol. The recording will be entered as device registered to Walter Beckford, no child identification included. At 4:47 p.m., I walked out of the state building into the Denver twilight. Celeste came out beside me. You haven't looked at the flow chart once since they left your lawn. I don't need to. I said it's done. The 7-day counteroffensive had run its course. Leon Hadfield had hand-delivered Lily's iPad recording to DA Financial Crimes. The mechanism had finished itself, but Norbert was still behind his desk at 5:03 p.m., watching the Denver County Court electronic docket with the expression of a general observing an enemy column march confidently into a sealed canyon. Aldous filed his emergency ex parte petition at 4:47, he said without pulling his eyes from the screen. Alleges sudden erratic financial behavior. Claims rapid capital liquidation, argues you're burning through assets in a confused state. It's precisely the move I mapped out for him on Monday. His only play left. Will it land, I asked. CRS, sections 15-16-200, 7 and 13-41-104 require a 14-day standard hearing minimum. Emergency orders can't issue without independent medical board verification. Norbert smiled. I uploaded our response bundle 42 minutes before he ever filed. Dr. Paxford's capacity, affidavit, the Crestline fraud complaint, the live APS case file, real-time fidelity transaction logs showing zero dissipation. When Aldous opens his workstation tomorrow morning, he'll find my response package sitting there like a spring-loaded trap. I watched Norbert work for another 20 minutes. Then I took out my phone and drafted a text to Declan. Meet me at Copper Door Coffee, South Broadway, at 8. Come alone. I sent it. 3 minutes later, a red receipt, and it's no response. You're going to meet him? Norbert asked. I have to, I said. Before the indictments come down, before he's behind counsel who'll instruct him not to speak to me while he's still my son-in-law and not yet a defendant. What will you say? That I love him, and that love doesn't mean I'll tear apart the architecture of justice to spare him from the consequences of his own choices. I left Norbert's office at 6:30 and drove through Denver streets already swallowed by December dark. Stopped at a copy shop on the way, printed one document, folded it into my jacket pocket. Copper Door Coffee on South Broadway was subdued when I arrived at 7:45. I ordered black coffee and took a table near the back wall. Kept my eyes on the door. Declan came in at 8 p.m. sharp. He looked a decade older than he had 7 days ago, collar open eyes, bloodshot, carrying the weight of a man who hadn't slept. He'd never been on time for anything in his life unless dread was driving him. He lowered himself into the chair across from me without a word. I drew the folded document from my jacket pocket and slid it across the table toward him. Melinda's dissolution of marriage petition. Denver County Court stamp plainly visible. Filing timestamp. December 22nd, 2023, 7:23 a.m. Declan stared at it without touching it. When did you... His voice fractured. How long have you known? Since Monday afternoon, I said. 4 days. She filed this from the plane before it set down in Vail. You were seated right beside her ordering champagne 90 minutes later. He put his face in his hands. Oh, God. I sat across that Copper Door coffee table from Declan at 8:07 p.m. and watched the recognition move through him that his wife had legally ended their marriage from 35,000 feet while he sat next to her sipping champagne, and I had known about it for 4 days and said nothing. Silence. Just the hiss of the espresso machine and the low murmur of conversations from tables across the room. I spoke quietly without edge. You used your mother's death date as the password to the laptop where you stored every record of what you were doing to me. March 14th, 2021, I said. The day Dorinda died. You turned her death date into a tool. Declan whispered. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. But an apology isn't a substitute for consequences. You're looking at a criminal indictment. The machinery that runs that process is no longer mine to stop. Melinda told me it was just a bridge loan, Declan said, his voice hollowed out. She said you'd never find out. She said, I am a systems engineer, Declan. I read schematics. I always have. He raised his eyes to mine. They were red and raw. He had the look of someone who'd just realized the ground beneath everything he'd built was not solid. What comes next? He asked. The DA files charges. APS wraps their investigation. You and Melinda face prosecution. Roland faces prosecution. The legal process runs its course. And us, you and me. I reached across the table and rested my hand on his forearm. I love you, son. I said the words, carrying a weight I couldn't keep out of my voice. That will not change. But love doesn't mean I'll pull apart the structure of justice to protect you from what your choices set in motion. Declan gave a single nod. He couldn't find words. Take care of Lily, I said. Whatever unfolds for you and Melinda, that little girl has earned better than what she's been given so far. I stood, put cash on the table for the coffees, and walked out. Declan sat where I'd left him, head cradled in both hands. At 9:15, I called Norbert from my car, still parked outside the coffee shop. There's a final instrument I need to execute tonight, I said. Before tomorrow. I'm still at my desk, Norbert said. Come in. I reached 1800 Glenarm Place at 10 p.m. Norbert already had the paperwork drawn up. He'd understood what I needed before I'd put it into words. Irrevocable Education Trust for Lily Rose Beckford. $380,000 drawn from the shop sale proceeds. Private education funding through graduate school. Trustee Norbert Caswell. Disbursements restricted to tuition, books, and housing only. Unreachable by her parents. Unreachable by creditors. Protected. I signed it with the deliberate, steady hand that had been absent from every forged document Declan had fabricated in my name. Lines, authentic, clean, entirely my own. Norbert watched me sign. This is the instrument she'll fully understand when she's a grown woman, when she grasps what you preserved for her while her parents were busy trying to take everything. This is the asset allocation Dorinda expected of me, I said. Lily gets an education regardless of what becomes of her parents. $380,000. Irrevocable. Beyond the reach of anyone except the trustee for her tuition and housing. Clean lines, authentic signature. Mine. Norbert sealed it with the notary stamp and filed it electronically. Timestamp, December 27th, 2023, 10:43 p.m. I left his office at 11 o'clock and drove through quiet Arvada streets. My engineering journal lay open on the passenger seat, turned to the flowchart page. 6 boxes filled with check marks, each one a completed node. 1 box still empty. Node 7 would execute tomorrow morning, the last instrument, the final pressure point. But that night, moving through empty streets at 11:18 p.m., my mind stayed on Declan sitting alone at Copper Door Coffee, staring at Melinda's in-flight divorce petition, on Lily's education trust sealed and filed, on Dorinda's empty chair in my kitchen. The 7-day counteroffensive was complete, but the cost was measured in family, not in dollars. I woke at 6 a.m. on December 28th, exactly 7 days since the phone call that had set everything moving. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window in Dorinda's cardigan sweater, watching first light come over Arvada. The engineering journal lay open on the table. 7 boxes in neat rows. 6 bearing check marks. 1 still blank. I sat down and picked up my pen. December 28th. 7 days since I found Declan using Dorinda's death date as a password. 6 boxes checked. 1 remains. I set a single check mark in the 7th box. Node 7, eviction execution. The system is complete. Engineering discipline plans are completed before execution, not after. I marked the final node at 6:03 a.m., knowing it would execute in 3 hours when a commercial locksmith rekeyed the Washington Park house at 1614 Willowgate Drive. Dorinda's sweater still carried traces of her perfume even 4 years after she'd gone. I'd worn it the morning of her funeral. I was wearing it the morning I evicted Declan from the house we had built together. The flowchart was complete. The mechanism would close at 9 a.m. I arrived at 1614 Willowgate Drive at 8:55. Norbert was already there, standing at the curb in the December cold. A white pickup pulled up at 9 a.m. exactly. The driver stepped out. Property manager Boyd Tremaine, mid-40s, carrying a clipboard and a leather tool bag. "Mr. Beckford, Mr. Caswell," he said, shaking our hands. "Locksmith is ready, under CRS sections 15-16-207 and 13-41-104. The occupancy termination notice expired at midnight January 2nd. We're within legal parameters for cylinder replacement. Proceed," Norbert said. "Mr. Beckford and I are here as statutory witnesses. I looked at that house, the one Dorinda and I had purchased in 1988, 35 years ago, the porch where I had held 3-month-old Lily and raised a glass to her future. The door Dorinda had chosen the paint color for. This is the house my wife and I bought 35 years ago," I said to no one in particular. "I held my granddaughter on that porch when she was 3 months old. Now I'm changing the locks to keep her father out." The locksmith, a young man with a tool belt and drill case, approached the front entrance and started on the cylinder. The drill whined. Metal shavings scattered across the welcome mat Dorinda had picked out at Target in 2017. I stood on the Washington Park lawn at 9:17 a.m., watching a commercial locksmith bore out the entrance cylinders of the home I'd owned for 35 years. The house where Dorinda had chosen the door color, where I'd carried Declan in from the hospital as an infant, where I'd held Lily on the porch and toasted her future, and understood that this eviction wasn't merely a change of locks. It was a surgical removal of my son from the physical architecture of family memory. The locksmith finished the front entrance at 9:32, moved to the rear, then the garage. Boyd affixed a laminated notice to the front door glass with industrial adhesive. Property held exclusively under Walter Wesley Beckford. Revocable trust, residential occupancy terminated by order of grantor. All correspondence to Norbert Caswell, Esquire, 1800 Glenarm Place, Denver, Colorado, 8/02/02. Notice is legally compliant, Boyd said. Clear statement of trust ownership, occupancy termination, and correspondence address. If occupants attempt entry, it becomes criminal trespass. Declan and Melinda are currently at an extended stay hotel near DIA, Norbert said. They were notified by certified mail and email both. No argument of insufficient notice is available to them. I stood looking at that laminated sheet. 35 years. Dorinda had chosen the paint color for that door. Now it bore a legal notice declaring Declan couldn't walk through it. At 9:45, Boyd placed a set of new brass keys in my palm. "Complete key set," he said. "Front entrance, rear entrance, garage. New cylinders, new cuts. Every previous key is permanently void." I stood holding those new brass keys, front entrance, rear entrance, garage. My house permanently secured against Declan. "The system is operating under correct specifications," I said. Norbert looked at me. "That's it. 7 days of legal architecture, and the final node closes with a quality control phrase from engineering." That's exactly what it was, I said. Quality control. The system had suffered a catastrophic failure. I identified the fault, isolated the damaged components, and restored operational integrity. The specifications are correct now. We drove to 1800 Glen Arm Place at 11 a.m. Midway there, Norbert's phone lit up with an email notification. He glanced at the dashboard screen. "Pinnacle Capital Partners," he said. He pulled to the curb, opened the message on his phone, and read it aloud. Pinnacle Capital Partners filed an emergency ex parte motion for immediate asset attachment against Vreeland Property Group Denver at 9:47 this morning. Motion granted at 10:15. Every commercial credit line frozen by judicial order. Vreeland Property Group Denver filed emergency liquidation bankruptcy at 10:52. Roland's entire empire came apart in 4 hours. "Correct," I said. Norbert continued. "Pinnacle learned that his plan to access your accounts through fraud was under active state investigation. They had no intention of waiting for the January 1st deadline. They moved this morning and seized everything." We arrived at Norbert's office at 11:20. Celeste was already there working through subpoenaed email chains on Norbert's computer. "You need to see this," she said as we walked in. Norbert brought up the thread. "Roland to Melinda. Time-stamped 10:14 a.m. that morning. Your strategy has completely collapsed. I'm losing my entire brokerage because you swore the old man was too senile to notice the transfers. Pinnacle just froze everything. You've destroyed my life." Celeste looked across at me. "He's blaming his own daughter for the collapse of his scheme, not for the fraud for failing to pull it off." "The mechanism failed under load," I said. "Now the components are assigning blame to each other for the structural inadequacy." We spent the next 3 hours working through the documentation. A PS investigation status. DA referral timeline, Fidelity account restoration schedule, Ridgecrest Bridge, capital fraud complaint response. At 2:47 p.m. my phone rang. Celeste's number. I looked up. She was standing 10 feet away, holding her own phone, eyes fixed on me. She spoke 3 words into her receiver that reached me both through the line and across the room. "It is finished." I returned to my Arvada kitchen at 10:08 p.m. The 7-day counteroffensive was over. Celeste had spoken 3 words, "It is finished." But I sat alone at my kitchen table in the silence, waiting for the confirmation I already knew was on its way. I brewed coffee, let it turn cold, sat staring at Dorinda's empty chair. The refrigerator ran with the same mechanical hum it had made 7 days ago when Declan's text had arrived. 168 hours from discovery to resolution. The flowchart journal lay closed on the counter, all 7 boxes checked. Dorinda had sat in that chair for 53 years. Now it was empty, and I was sitting with cold coffee waiting for word that Declan had been arrested for trying to strip away my life. At 2:47 p.m., my phone rang. "Celeste's name on the screen," I answered. "It is finished," she said. Her voice carried the absolute calm of someone who had just watched a structure meet the ground. I closed my eyes. 7 days of tension drained from my shoulders. "Tell me," I said after a long pause. "I'm in my car 2 blocks from 1614 Willowgate Drive," Celeste said. "I just watched them take Declan into custody. Denver PD Economic Crimes Detectives Leon Hadfield from APS felony arrest warrants." "Walter, it's done." I set my coffee mug on the table. The kitchen was silent except for the refrigerator hum. "Details," I said. 2 Denver PD Economic Crimes Detectives plus Leon Hadfield," Celeste said. "Warrants from the DA, grand larceny, forgery, conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. Colorado statutes 18-4-41 and 18-5-102. I listened to my sister walk me through the mechanics of justice. Declan opened the door. At 2:03, she continued, stared at the badges for several seconds. No surprise on his face, Walter. He looked like a man who had finally arrived at a destination he'd been drifting toward for months. They placed him in custody right there on the porch. I stood in my Arvada kitchen holding the phone and understood that perhaps Declan had wanted this to end, had wanted someone to stop him before he traveled any deeper into the moral territory Melinda had charted for him. "And Melinda?" I asked. "Taken into custody 15 minutes later," Celeste said. "Commercial parking structure near Greenwood Village. She was in Audra's sedan trying to get clear of the area. Roland was arrested at the same time at the Vreeland Property Group Denver offices. Audra and Garrett received material witness subpoenas. The system had run to completion, every pressure point removed. The mechanism had come apart under its own structural weight, exactly as I'd calculated." "There's something else," Celeste said, her voice dropping. "Walter Lilly is at Audra's house with a nanny. A PS is executing a temporary protective placement order. She's being removed from guardian custody pending the criminal proceedings. I was already moving toward the door. Where are they taking her? APS supervised handoff. 4 p.m. Thornton residential address. I'm sending you the location now. I'm leaving now, I said. I picked up my keys, looked at the empty kitchen chair one final time. 7 days, December 22nd to December 28th. Discovery to resolution. I zipped Dorinda's cardigan and walked out into the December cold. I reached the Thornton residential parking lot at 4 p.m. exactly. Snow had begun falling again, light flakes drifting through the glow of streetlights just coming on in the late afternoon. An APS caseworker led Lily out from a state vehicle. 9 years old, red winter jacket arms wrapped around the stuffed doll I'd bought her last summer at the Denver Zoo. Her eyes were wide, confused by the state vehicles, the unfamiliar adults, the absence of her mother. Then she found my car. She broke into a run across the lot, her small boots punching through the thin layer of snow. I dropped to one knee on the cold asphalt, brought myself down to her level, and held my arms open. "Grandpa is here, Lily," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." She hit me like a wave, face buried against my shoulder. Her small body was shaking. "Grandpa, where's Mommy?" she asked, voice muffled in Dorinda's sweater. "The lady said Mommy had to go somewhere and I have to stay with you now. You're staying with me for a while, sweetheart," I said, pulling her in close against the cold. "Everything is going to be okay. Grandpa promises." She said nothing more, just held on. I shut my eyes and thought about the $380,000 in irrevocable trust I'd signed into existence the night before at Norbert's office. This child permanently shielded from the financial wreckage her parents had made. Whatever lay ahead for Declan and Melinda Lily's future was protected. Dorinda would have expected nothing less. Lily's voice came softly against my shoulder, barely a sound. "Your sweater smells nice, Grandpa. It looks like the one Grandma was knitting in the old photo album you showed me last summer." I pulled her closer. The first real smile in 7 days found my face. "It was hers, sweetheart," I said. "She finished it a long time ago." "I miss Grandma," Lily whispered. "I miss her too," I said. I stood up, lifting Lily with me. She was so much bigger than I remembered. 9 years old now. The last time I'd carried her like this, she'd been 5. I got her settled into the back seat with the stuffed doll and buckled her in. Then I drove west toward Arvada through the December twilight. She talked the whole way about the doll, about whether the stuffed animals she'd left in the spare room last summer were still there, about what we were having for dinner. The house that had felt too large and too quiet that very morning would be full of a 9-year-old's voice before the night was through. Even with Lily still talking in the seat behind me as I turned into the driveway, I knew the counteroffensive wasn't entirely finished. One thing remained, and it had nothing to do with law or leverage. I had to figure out what to say to a 9-year-old about why her mother and father weren't walking through anyone's door tonight. 6 in the morning, December 28th. The warrants hadn't landed yet. The eviction was still hours away. I sat by myself at the kitchen table in Arvada, and the only sound in the house was Lily breathing in the room next to mine. I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out Dorinda's note for what I knew would be the last time. That scrap of paper had ridden there for 6 days, through every node, every legal maneuver, every confrontation. Through all of it. I opened the folds and read her words out loud to the chair across from me. The chair she used to fill. "I watched Melinda look at you like a bank account from the wedding day. You didn't see it because you refused to look. Don't let love for Declan blind you to the truth. I love you. F." I set it flat on the table and looked at her empty chair for a long moment. "Dorinda," I told the silence I am looking now. 7 full days. 7 full. I saw every bit of it. The password protecting the accounts Declan used against me was the date she died. The life insurance policy had priced me at $3.5 million dead. He'd reached into the worst day of my life and turned it into a key. She had seen that coming. Dying of pancreatic cancer 4 years ago, she'd read the situation with more clarity than I ever had. She'd condensed it into a single handwritten note, the way an engineer marks a load-bearing point on a diagram. Fault location, projected failure mode, data not to be dismissed. I returned the note to its original folds with the same care I'd apply to a technical document, then slid it into a clean archival envelope and sealed the flap, not to close the chapter, but to protect the record. That note was her final diagnostic. She'd flagged the structural weakness before the collapse came. Preserving her analysis, was the minimum she deserved. My engineering journal was open on the table next to my coffee cup. 7 boxes, 7 check marks, a PS case open, Fidelity accounts frozen, Ridgecrest Bridge capital locked, Brennan Kirby's testimony on record, cognitive evaluation perfect, eviction executed, emergency guardianship petition blocked, every node sealed. Before the morning light reached the rooftops, the warrants would be served. The mechanism would complete its final rotation, and Dorinda's reading of the situation would hold accurate across every variable. At 2:55 p.m., with the warrants already served and Lily settled inside, I walked out to the front porch with a fresh mug. Through the storm door, I could hear Celeste and Lily working on the Lego Technic roller coaster set, Lily's voice running bright and quick. I stood on the planks and let my thoughts go quiet. No next move to calculate, no threat to map. "Are you coming in?" Celeste called. "Lily's asking Grandpa to check whether her roller coaster gears are seated right." "1 minute," I said. I didn't turn around. December 28, 3:06 p.m. My hands were warmed by the mug. I looked east from my Arvada porch toward Washington Park, the same corridor where 6 days earlier, black Escalades had pushed through snow-flying Vreeland family vanity plates. Nothing moved on the street now, no vehicles with agendas, no pressure being applied from any direction. A grandfather standing on his own porch in the December stillness while his granddaughter laughed inside the house. 7 days of continuous tactical engagement, and now nothing to engage. The flowchart was sealed, every variable accounted for. I could simply stand here and breathe. I raised the mug, took a slow sip, stared down the cold asphalt. Then I spoke into the Colorado winter air quietly, to no one listening. "You didn't cut me out, Declan," I said to the empty block. "You and the greed your wife's family carried cut yourselves out of my life, out of every dollar of the estate that should rightfully have been yours. Merry Christmas, son." I turned and went back inside. The oak door closed behind me with a firm, clean click. From somewhere deeper in the warm house, Lily's laughter bounced off the walls. December 30th. I was back in Norbert's office for the first time since the case filings had wrapped. He walked me through every legal outcome with the measured cadence of someone logging entries in a system report. "Declan took a plea," Norbert said. 3 years suspended sentence, 5 years supervised probation. He gave certified testimony against Roland Vreeland and Aldous Petwick in front of a federal grand jury. I absorbed that. Declan had weighed his options and picked cooperation. Roland drew 7 years in state corrections on grand larceny and RICO conspiracy charges. Norbert kept reading. Vreeland Property Group Denver fully liquidated entity dissolved. Melinda 2 years in a state facility Colorado real estate license stripped by the regulatory board permanently. Aldous Petwick formally disbarred by the Colorado Supreme Court. Crestline Wellness Center medical license revoked 2 of its officers under criminal indictment. Entry after entry, every account settled. Lily is living with her maternal grandmother, Audra, Norbert said. She comes to your Arvada home every weekend. The trust disbursements have begun. First payment last week covered enrollment in classical violin lessons. $380,000 standing between a 9-year-old girl and the financial rubble her parents left behind. Norbert pushed a linen envelope across the desk toward me. "Came through Declan's probation officer," he said. "He asked that personal correspondence be routed through official channels. I examined the outside. Declan's handwriting, still sealed. I left the seal intact, tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket, the same pocket where Dorinda's note had lived for 6 days. I'll open it when I'm in the right place for it," I said. Norbert gripped my hand and said nothing for a moment. He'd spent enough years around grief to know when words would only reduce things. "You did what Dorinda knew you were capable of," he said at last. "You held the architecture together. She handed me the blueprint," I said. "I built to spec. Out in the late December morning with 2 pieces of paper on my person. One written by a woman who had loved me and slipped away 4 years ago, who had seen the danger and put it in writing while she still could. One written by a son I hadn't stopped loving, whose road ahead I couldn't yet read. Dorinda's cardigan was at home on its hook waiting. The system had been restored to its correct operating state. And for the first time in 7 days, perhaps the first time in 4 years, I was at peace. If you made it this far, thank you. Genuinely. This story took something out of me to tell, and I hope it gave something back to you in return. What Walter went through cost him years of trust he can never fully recover. It cost him the version of his son he thought he knew. And it cost him a kind of peace that once broken has to be rebuilt from scratch. But here is what I believe. With my whole chest, God does not leave the people who are paying attention. Walter kept his eyes open. when it would have been easier to look away, and the truth, every thread of it, eventually found the light. Dorinda had seen it first. She always did. If these grandpa revenge stories stay with you the way they stay with me, it's because they're really father stories. Stories about what a man will do when the people he built his life around decide to take it from him instead. Here is what I took from Walter's story and what I'd pass on to anyone who needs to hear it today. Keep records of everything. Not because you expect to be betrayed, but because documentation is the only language a courtroom understands. If someone close to you changes a financial document without telling you, that is not an oversight. Treat it like the emergency it is. Before you confront anyone, build the full picture first. Emotion is natural. Evidence is what wins. And never mistake a person's silence for innocence. Dorinda's note was quiet for 4 years. It was still right. If this story moved you, leave a comment below and tell me what stayed with you. Share it with someone who might need the reminder that it is never too late to stand up for what is yours. And if you haven't yet subscribed to Grandpa's Revenge, there are more stories here and every one of them matters. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.